Finance, Economic Development and Tourism Committee. Okay, I see we do have quorum, so we can go ahead. My name is Deirdre Bartman. I'm the chairperson for this respective committee. And today we are dealing with the briefing by the department and the Unemployment Insurance Fund on the challenges experienced with the financial administration of the COVID-19 Temporary Employee Relief Scheme in the Western Cape and the role the UIF played in supporting the citizens of the province. We'll then, after that, go forward to discuss the way forward on a public participation process for the COVID-19 TERS inquiry or public hearing, if you want to call it that, which we'll be having soon on the UIF COVID TERS funds. And then we will consider and possibly adopt the draft annual activities report for the 2020-2021 financial year, as well as the draft minutes of 31 March 2021, followed by resolutions and actions of the committee. Colleagues, for connectivity purposes, I'm going to put my camera off after this. I'm going to first ask that colleagues, members, first introduce themselves, please. And then I'll ask for the persons from the UIF and respective department to introduce themselves. And then they can jump straight into the presentation. And we will then have questions and answers after the presentation. Colleagues, you may now introduce yourself. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, member of the committee.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen.
Good morning, Chairperson. My name is Nomi Nkondlo, member of the committee.
Thank you, Member Nkondlo.
Good morning, Chair and members. Dalen Mitchell.
Thank you, Member Mitchell. I don't see any other members online, so I will now hand over to the department, to the UIF, to introduce their delegation with us today, please.
Down to level 3. Again,
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Marsha Bronkhorst. I'm acting as the Unemployment Insurance Fund Commissioner. And with me for support is Ms. Matapelo Matabogi. I don't see her on the screen, but she was here. And I'll also be joined by the Director for Provincial Operations, Mr. Alan Ragavalu. But I've heard that he's having some challenges on our side in terms of connectivity, but he will join us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. You may introduce yourself.
Ms. Matabogi, that was on the screen just now, Chairperson.
Yes,
Thank
you can, Ms. Matabogi, you can introduce yourself for us, please.
I think she's shy
Good
now.
morning, my name is Good morning, my name is Matapelo Matabogi from the Office of the Director General.
Thank you so much. Ms. Bronkhorst, are you going to be flighting the presentation?
Yes, that is why I brought the very capable Ms. Matabogi with me. She's going to do it. We work well together, so she's going to help us. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. We'll just wait for the presentation to be flighted and then you can jump straight in. The members have received it via email as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As Ms. Matabogi will just make it a slide presentation. On the second slide, I'm going to just address the issue of the presentation contents. I'm going to look at what is the legislative framework for the Unemployment Insurance Fund, the Unemployment Insurance Fund footprint in the Western Cape, the types of benefits that we pay, just as background information before I zoom into the COVID-19 TERS benefits, and then also a little bit about the Follow the Money project, which I'm sure you have heard or read about in the press. So if we may move to the next slide, please, Matapelo. The legislative framework for the Unemployment Insurance Act is the Unemployment Insurance Act, as well as the Unemployment Insurance Contributions Act. And this act empowers the UIF to register all employers and employees that are working in South Africa. Now, there are a few exclusions. Firstly, there are employees who are employed for less than 24 hours per month are excluded from the Act. And then a member of a municipal council and members of the Council of Traditional Leaders are excluded from the Act. And then a few other exclusions, but these are the important ones that I would like to mention. Then the Unemployment Insurance Fund is established in terms of Section 4.1 of the Act, and it was amended, as you know, in 2001. And this empowers the fund as well as the SARS Commissioner to collect monthly contributions from both employers and the workers, and then SARS pays it over to the fund. Can we look at the next one, please, Matapelo? So we have, as all institutions and entities, departments in the country, have a constitutional mandate, which is Section 27, to provide adequate social security nets to protect vulnerable workers. And that leads to the purpose of the UI Act to establish the UIF to which employers and employees can contribute, and from which employees who become unemployed or their beneficiaries, when the employee should pass on, are entitled to benefits, and in doing so to alleviate the harmful economic and social effects of unemployment. And then we also have a policy mandate, as we know, in terms of the MTSF, the creation of decent employment and providing the adequate social safety nets to protect vulnerable workers. So how do we apply the Act? We must be used to pay benefits, to reimburse excess contributions to employers. It does occasionally happen that employers pay us too much, and then we reimburse them for that. And then the payment of the remuneration and allowances to members of the UIF board and its committees, and then other expenditure reasonably incurred relating to the applications of the Act. There will be administrative costs. Clearly, we have to incur those, so those will be paid as well. Can we look at the next slide, please, Matapelo? So in the Western Cape, I'm bringing it a little bit closer now. In the Western Cape, what is the UIF footprint? There's one provincial office situated in Cape Town, and 12 labour centres in the Western Cape that are fully operational in terms of its permanent offices. And they are situated in the bigger areas, and the UIF services are delivered there. And then there are a further 88 visiting points within the province, where the officials from the Department of Employment and Labour go and visit periodically. Some places it's once a week or twice a week. Others it might be monthly, depending on the work in terms of how many clients there are that must be assisted by the officials. And then we are processing unemployment insurance fund claims at 16 sites in the province. So in your provincial office, labour centres, and at some other sites, these claims are being processed. So what types of benefits are there? There are unemployment benefits, which I think you are all mostly familiar with. Very important, there are some conditions for someone to claim unemployment insurance benefits. The person must be capable and available to work, and the person must be registered as a work seeker, and the person must apply in person for the benefits. We pay this benefit to people who have been retrenched, who have been dismissed, or whose contracts have been expired, but we do not pay benefits to people who have resigned. Then we have illness benefits. People must become unemployed due to their illness. It should be for a period longer than 7 days. And we have to have a medical certificate that is completed by a medical practitioner. Then we also have maternity benefits to most probably a female contributor who is expecting or has conceived a child. And then it must also be accompanied by a medical certificate or a birth certificate. Adoption benefits, order of adoption issued by a competent court or prospective parents in terms of the court order. And dependence benefits is to a spouse or a life partner, children under 18 years or dependent students under 25 years, or nominated persons by the deceased worker. So those are the benefits. And before we go to the next slide, if we can just go back for a moment, please. The reason why we're not paying for resignation, and this is a point that is currently being debated extensively at NETLAG, is that unemployment insurance is an insurance. And if you resign, you cause your own loss. You cause your own loss of work. Unless it's constructive dismissal, that's a different story. But if you just decide, now I've had it, I'm going, or I'm no longer interested in working. Just as when we do short-term insurance, we are expected to put burglar bars in front of our windows and burglar doors in front of opening doors and all these other things. And when you have a break-in, the insurance company then refuses the claim to say you did not comply to the prescripts of their policy. You caused your own loss by failing to do these things. It's the same principle. Unemployment insurance is an insurance fund against the ravages of unemployment. So if we now move to the COVID TERS, and I would want us to just for a moment keep this slide on so that I can explain a little bit around the COVID TERS benefits. When the pandemic kicked off last year in March, it was decided that because of the hard lockdown and there not being clarity on how long this was last, that the UIF would come in as a way of helping workers who would not be earning an income in that period. And it was conceptualized that we would pay 40 billion rand, and we set 40 billion rand aside to pay this benefit. And there were only 2 tests that a worker had to pass in order to get the benefits. You are aware that when a worker applies for ordinary unemployment insurance benefits, he or she must have been a contributor, the contributions must have been up to date, he or she must have been declared to the fund in order to access the benefits. So the UIF with its social partners at NEDLAC decided that there will only be 2 verifications or 2 tests a worker must pass. The first one is the employer must declare this worker to the UIF so that we know this is a legitimate worker. And secondly, then the worker must pass a verification test in terms of a valid ID or a valid passport. We were not even interested in seeing whether the employer has been up to date or is up to date with the contributions. At that stage, it was decided that we would follow this up after the pandemic has run its course. What we have found is that up to a quarter of the workers that we all of a sudden had to pay benefits for in terms of COVID TERS have never been declared to the fund. So there is a substantial lack of compliance to legislation by employers. So they ran to the fund to request payment of the TERS benefit, but they never declared the workers and paid contributions over to the fund. Now, if we move to the next slide, please, Matapela. I've given you a national picture to give you a sense of where Western Cape is lying in terms of what we have paid. Now, the number of employers are the number of unique employers that have applied for the benefit per province. One would see that in a province, for example, let me use Western Cape, there might be 54,981 unique employers who have applied, but because they applied multiple times every month, or perhaps for 3 months or 7 months or whatever the case might be, this number will be much more when you look at the numbers of applications that we've dealt with. So it might be 250,000 for Western Cape, but the real number of employers in terms of the unemployment insurance reference number is 54,000, just under 55,000. And for employees, the unique number of employees in the Western Cape that have applied is 1.1 million. Now we have paid to the Western Cape economy 10.4 billion rand in terms of the TERS benefit, which you will see is the second highest after that of Gauteng. In total, we have paid 59 billion rand in the TERS benefit, which is 20 billion more than what was originally conceptualized for payment of the benefit. If we move to the next slide, I would just want to give you a sense here of the number of applications we received and the number of employees we have managed to pay. You will see that we've received a number of applications from companies. This is for beneficiaries. And then on the column next to that is the number of beneficiaries that we have indeed paid. Now, there is a substantial number difference between what we have received in terms of the overall totals. And you'll recall I said that this is where the issue of the unique ID number or the unique applicant comes in. Here we're talking payments, we're not talking unique persons. So we received claims in April from 1 million for 1 million workers, which we could pay only 355,000. And I'll explain to you now what the reason for that is. In May, we received applications of 704, and we paid 277,000. And it goes down so that you can see the last, what we call iteration period, October to December. We received 28,000 applications, and we have paid thus far 11,000 of them. Now, the difference between the number of the applications we have received and that we have paid, the reason is the fact that employers failed to declare their employees to the fund, and we cannot pay if the employee is not declared. As I explained earlier to you, that's one of our tests. And the employers also, we're having challenges with bank verifications. We have embarked on the process to call each and every employer who has not been verified in terms of the bank account. But the response from employers is very slow. And we cannot continue to hang these in the air. We have, through our structures at NETLAG, through media, etc., tried to tell employers to make sure that they contact us again so that we make sure that the bank accounts can be verified. We can do everything, but if the bank account is not verified, it kicks the payment back, and then we are back to square one. So this is the reason. Another reason is that a substantial number of workers in the Western Cape are in the hospitality industry and are non-South African citizens. And what we have found with non-South African citizens, we have to treat all people equally. And the test for South African citizens is a declaration to the fund and a valid ID. The test for a foreign worker is a declaration to the fund and a valid passport number. Or if there's an asylum seeker status or whatever other status, that must be verified by the Department of Home Affairs. So there are a substantial number of foreign workers that we are not getting verified at this stage. We have gone so far as to use the declarations to SARS as a possible verification means for foreign workers to get workers paid. But I cannot take away the verification process from foreign workers. That would be unfair to South African citizens as well. If we move to the next slide, please, Matapelu. The Western Cape top 10 sector, these are the sectors that have claimed the most and where we have paid the most money. I've put them down in priority or in sequence from top to bottom. Firstly is personal services. 17,000 employers there, and personal services include what we would say hospitality in terms of guest houses, hotels, etc., and so forth. Also hairdressers, beauticians, and anything else linked to personal services. Trade is the second biggest that have claimed, followed by the building industry, the mining industry, educational services. And I want to stop here with the educational services. I'm going to later on talk a little bit about the highest risk sectors that we have found. And we have found that schools who are supported by the government have claimed. Now, in principle, if it's a school governing body post, we can understand that. But if it's a school that is being funded wholly by the government, there is no reason for them to claim. Yet a massive number of schools have claimed this benefit. And we are busy with follow the money, which I will talk about a little bit later. And schools are our highest sector in terms of red flags, of having claimed when they were not entitled to claim. followed by agriculture, followed by the air industry, which is not just airlines, it's also all the services that one would get around an airport and on an airport, followed by the clothing sector, entertainment, and the banking sector. And all these make up to the total that I have explained earlier of just over 10 billion rand that was paid to the Western Cape. If we can move to the follow the money, the next slide, please, Matapelo. So I said earlier that one of the things that was not a test was the fact that the employer's contribution should be up to date, and that at that time it was decided that this would be followed later. This has been done in terms of what we call the Follow the Money project. Now, we appointed 7 audit and accountant firms to conduct this post-verification audit to make sure that we get the funds, A, to the workers if it's not been paid to the workers, and B, returned to the fund if it was claimed fraudulently, and C, to take then action in terms of charges of fraud and corruption to be brought. So first and foremost, the verification team would verify that the funds were used as they were intended, confirm whether the funds reached the intended employees, and verify the accuracy and validity of the application. We have found that numerous employers inflated salaries. We have found that numerous employers claimed the TERS benefit and then claimed an administration fee to pay it over to their workers. Some employers used the TERS benefit and deducted statutory deductions like tax and so on. So this is all part of the follow the money process. The support team, we trace and track all untraceable employers. We assist with the debt collection where needed, and they also assist with fraud investigations where they are needed. So what have we done at the Western Cape up to the 30th of March? If we can just go to the next slide, please. Next, thank you. We have, because of the fact that it's such a huge number of employers, prioritized employers, in terms of the biggest number of workers at any given employer, so that we all, if an employer was previously flagged for fraudulent claims, or they were flagged by the Auditor General in the audit that was performed, these were the employers that we had prioritized first and foremost in terms of the audit. So in the Cape at the moment, we've verified 45,000 employers involving 45 employers involving 47,000 employees, and the money associated with fraud, this is fraud that we have picked up, is 3.8 million rand, of which we have thus far recovered 250,000. There's one employer that was suspected at that stage of fraudulent activity. They have increased a little bit since March. And then there are 8 employers who refused access to the audit companies. When we entered into an agreement to pay this money, employers had to sign a memorandum of agreement that they would allow the UIF auditors access at any time requested to do the audits, the post-verification audits. Now, any employer who's refusing to cooperate is immediately referred to the SIU for further investigation, because it is the view of the UIF that if an employer has got nothing to hide, they would not refuse to cooperate. So it is immediately escalated to the SIU. So if we can look at the next slide, some of the common findings that we have identified, that employers receive TERS, but they haven't paid it over to employees, or they claimed for employees who are working. They paid employees less TERS than received. I have already alluded to that. Or they have submitted false claims. Now, these are not necessarily only Western Cape. These are national type of findings, which I thought might be interesting for the committee to know about. Well, the TERS was utilized for personal expenses, such as paying off credit cards. We've got, for example, a case in another province where the employer, was using the money to buy 2 very nice cars and paid nice money to the family and bought some land and so on. So all these have happened, and this employer has been arrested. Employers claimed the TERS, but they still paid the employees the full salary. The TERS funds were utilized for operating costs. We've, for example, had employers who bought machinery for their workshops in using the TERS funds. And then another problem is that employers overstated salaries. I, for example, can remember one inquiry I received from a company which was fighting the HR manager. Why did we pay so little in terms of TERS? Because the salaries of the people were 14,000 rands. But when we looked at the system of the UIF, the salaries that had been declared to the UIF and on which contributions were paid was 7,000 rands. So this employer inflated the salaries. So the one case that I want to talk about here of suspected fraud, if we can move to slide number 15. I'm not going to name the company because the matter is still with the South African Police Service. Matapelo, if we can just move, please. There is an amount of 3 million rand involved. If we can move to the next one, please. Thank you. 3.8 million rand is involved, and this company was operating fully during lockdown. So there was no reason for them to claim the TERS benefit, and therefore this was a fraudulent claim. I have put down the names of the non-cooperating companies so that members can see. Perhaps some of them are companies that you are aware of, or you have some influence that you can tell them that the matter is with the SIU now. There are the 8 names. I don't think I have to read them to the committee. The presentation speaks for itself. And then the last slide, I just wanted to give you a sense of what sectors we have visited in the Western Cape. We have visited non-profit organizations, the wood industry, air, leather, financial sectors, manufacturing, trade, personal services, educational, glass making, and then employment services, or as they used to be called, labor brokers. Thank you very much, Chairperson. That ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bronkhorst. I think you have actually given us a lot of information, and I do think members are likely going to have a lot of questions. So I'm going to open up for hands now, and then I'll just take a first round of questions first. If none, I will start. Okay, I see Member van der Westhuizen, Member Nkondlo. Okay, those are the only hands I see for now. In that order, please, and then I will pose my questions afterwards. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to everybody that has joined us. Chair, my first question is the following. We have received reports of delays experienced by employers that submitted claims for TERS funding, and perhaps if Ms. Bronkhorst would be so kind just to tell us, what was the experience. I can just imagine that this was an enormous task that was, and excuse my lack of a better word, dumped onto the UIF. I can just imagine that a task of this magnitude would require extra staff on hand, that it would require special software. I am under the impression that, for example, throughout the TERS process, a web-based claims system was introduced, etc. And perhaps Ms. Bronkhorst would be just to be so kind as to tell us what were the challenges that they as a fund experienced at the time. And then secondly, also, to what extent were they able to verify databases with that of Home Affairs, with that of SARS, with that of their own databases? So those are my first two questions. And then just thirdly, Chair, I see that one of the issues that Ms. Bronkhorst raised that they had with employers was that employers claimed TERS funding while still paying employees. Now, I think if one just think of the situation on the ground, many employers were witnessing the hardship of employees or were anticipating the hardship of employees. And I can just imagine that they then, from borrowed money or from saved money, then advanced money to employees because of the delays experienced through TERS. And now it seems to me as if those employers that really reached out and tried to support the employees in a time of crisis are now listed as people that have actually breached the rules of TERS. Perhaps you could just explain that to me, because it seems at this stage to me extremely unfair to list those employers as people that have now, committed fraud or have transgressed in terms of the TERS rules. Thank you, Chair, and I do hope that there will be an opportunity for further rounds of questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member van der Westhuizen. I do think we have quite a bit of time, so I'm hoping that we'll definitely have a second round. Member Mkondlo, you may go ahead.
No, thanks. Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the Commissioner for the presentation. I've got a couple of questions just for clarity. I want to understand, I think, the concept that the Commissioner, if she can once again just explain more this thing of employees that are not declared. What does that mean? And actually, what would be in the course of labor relations? What does that mean? Because when one look at the percentage, when one just looks at the numbers, I just want to understand this concept of employees that are not declared. My next question would be, what would have been, do they have data to show in the Western Cape on the numbers that they have paid, perhaps even nationally, on the numbers that have been paid, the percentage of the South African workers versus the foreign workers? Is that data available, and can they be able to provide us that information? Then on the sectors, I want to ask, understanding our economy in the province, and also where one would have been receiving a lot of complaints and calls about, lack of payment of the UIF tiers. I just want to understand the sectors, perhaps they are placed in another category here. Where would the sector, like your retail sector, where would it fall actually in the different sectors? Because I'm just looking at the numbers here of the sectors that have where benefits have been paid. Just to understand, is it part of trade? Where does it fall in as far as the sectors we have here are concerned? And then what I'm interested in further is that in the findings of fraud in the Western Cape, when one considers what has been reported, is it also possible to indicate against the different categories that you had given as the type of, because you're saying the findings identified in slide 14, the findings identified are for the country. And here we are more interested in the province. So once again, is it possible for you to get such a data that indicates on the 8 findings that you have, what would have been the predominant issues in the province, and the nature, as you would explain here, received TERS but hasn't paid over to employees, and the percentages against the numbers that have been paid. Is that data available? And then in slide 9, one just want to understand what would be the reasons for the descending, which is the sort of decreasing sort of applications. If one looks at the months from April right to December, when you look at volumes, you can see that we started with huger volumes and we landed with a lot of fewer numbers. What would have been the situation? Because I would take it at face value that workers have been distressed because of COVID, across that particular period. Perhaps there's a reason why there is a decreasing sort of a trend in terms of the volumes. And then my last one, Chair, is that I'm quite a bit very much shocked when I looked at these numbers. Perhaps there's an explanation from the commissioner. If one looks at the number of employees in the Western Cape, they're about, I think it's 54,000. If it's not 54 million, I think it's 54,000. But when you look at the 54 million number of employees, yes. But when you look at the actual applications from April period until December, which is what is presented to us, you've got only about 2.8 applications that have been done to the value of 10.4 billion, and only less than 50% actually benefited. Isn't this this issue of these numbers for me quite surprising? I think that's the right word. It's quite surprising if one considers what is in slide. I'm trying to go back to these slides now. If one looks at slide number 8. In terms of the Western Cape number of employers and the number of employees versus the numbers one is given as the ultimate in terms of the period now, April to October, which actually justifies the 10.4 billion that has been paid out. But this money has been paid out only to almost about 1.1 million. And if one were to average out it, if one divide that 1.1 million against the 10 billion, and you're just looking at an average benefit per employer or per employee, perhaps are you able to provide those numbers? Because for me, I just don't understand the maths, about the number of employers and employees that we have in the Western Cape, the ones that actually applied and actually finally benefited, against the amount that has been paid out from the UIF. The numbers are very low, but the payout is so huge. If one, I think that's the point I'm trying to make here. Thank you for now, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Nkondlo. Let me just put on here quickly. Some of the other members have asked questions, but I will ask, I'll try and summarize some of my particular questions as well. Firstly, I just want to make a comment to the UIF officials. We need to help employers and employees to make it as easy as possible for them to be able to apply for UIF TERS benefits. But we also need to keep everyone accountable. And if everyone, whether you're an employee or whether you're an employer, if every single person only applies for that which they're entitled to, and that is paid out accordingly, then we will be able to stretch the South African rands in this particular fund as far as possible for everyone who deserves it. But also the Department of Labour and the UIF, because the Department of Labour is essentially your, for lack of a better word, your political department. And your department should have also been prepared before COVID occurred. Because what happened before COVID when the UIF was supposed to educate employers and follow up on the same matters it's currently following up upon before COVID? So yes, there are investigations now, but what happened before COVID? What were those procedures? Because if you only picked up that employees were not declared now, it is also a symptom of what was happening in the system previously. So if you can just please explain that to me, because one does not just wake up and then majority of employees are not declared. One does not just wake up and then a department, for example, is under-resourced or underfunded and not prepared. And then you mentioned there are 8 non-cooperating employers, those 8 names. I will put it to the committee later that we please send those names with urgency to our Western Cape Department of Economic Development. They have a red tape unit that assists with blockages, whether on a local, provincial or national level. So perhaps with our red tape unit in the province and the UIF office, perhaps between the two of you, you can try and sort that matter out as quickly as possible. And then you mentioned obviously the number of unique applications you've received. Can you also send us the total amount of applications you've received from employers and employees? And I do appreciate that you highlighted the unique ones. However, I have a question regarding a number on slide 7 and slide 8. On slide 7, you indicated that 1.1 million number of employees applied for the benefits. But on slide 8, the number of employees that were paid out is the total amount. And in the slide 7, you said that you're only putting the unique number there to show us. So for example, if you pay Deirdre instead of the 5 applications per month for Deirdre. So on slide 7, you're saying, okay, Deirdre is 1. But on the slide 8, you're saying, okay, but the total number of applications is also 1. So were there 1.1 million applications as well as 1.1 unique employees? Or how is that figure worked out? Because I don't understand the difference between the two. Because on slide 8, there's a difference between the number of applications compared to slide 7, the actual unique applications per employer. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say there. Okay. Then I just wanted to find out the monitoring of the payout to the employees. Can you please go through those and what your process is to monitor the payout by employers to employees to ensure that employees do get the money that they are entitled to? And I wanted to find out, of the unique employees, I've received complaints, for example, from my constituency where you only pay out some employees but not others. Are those related to the non-declaration of employees? If you just have some more information on that part, on that specifically, please. And then I wanted to find out, you mentioned there are periodical visits per month in different areas within the Western Cape that the UIF does in order to assist with these particular processes. Is it possible for you to please forward us the dates and times per month on a monthly basis to our committee, so that should our committee feel that we need to go do unscheduled oversight visits, that we can go and do those? Because in my constituency, I know, for example, that often a particular department, I'm not going to say which one it is, there are a few of you guys who come do periodical visits, but you will say, for example, that you'll come on a specific day and at a specific time, and then you don't come on that specific day, or you don't come at that specific time, and often the respective department would, for example, just, leave a few hours early, and that's not just one department. So I do think it would be helpful for us if you could send us where you will be, when you'll be there and what time you'll be there, so that as a committee, perhaps we are able to also go do unscheduled oversight visits. I would also like you to eventually, I'm not sure when we would receive a time for this, but I actually would like you to take us through a mock applications of the UIF TERS funding. And when I say mock applications, I would like you to essentially, and IT in your department can assist you with this. I know there's always back-end ways that one can do it. I would like you to essentially create almost not a fake employee or a fake employer, and show us through your own system how the application works from start when the application is submitted to the end of when it is paid out. And if you want, you can always use examples without the names and the actual details of applications you've already received in order to show us how it works. Because I physically want to see the application. I have tried sitting next to an employer to see how the system works, and unless you're actually a business that does the application, it's not easy for someone who's trying to do oversight over the system to actually see what is required, how it is filled in, and the process from start to finish. And then you mentioned that it's difficult sometimes for you to verify bank details of employers and employees. And I would just like to understand what has the entity done to contact the respective people regarding the verification of bank details? You emailed, you phone, what happens exactly? And is it not possible for the UIF to partner with SARS and their system in order to verify bank details? Because with the DTI and the SIP system, which has those businesses who are recorded on the system, for example, and registered, and similar to SARS, who then automatically gets the enterprise number on their system, and you have to submit the respective documentation on an annual basis. Why has the UIF and SARS and DTIC through SIPs not have a system where all of the information is registered at the same time? Because, for example, when you go onto DTIC's website to register your business, you can open up your bank account as well, where they've partnered with banks, and you can apply for your BE certificate, and you can apply for people who are on UIF on that system. So I don't understand why it's not incorporated more. And then on slide slide 9, you mentioned that there's a risk regarding schools applying for the UIF TERS funding. Could you please send that list to our committee so that we are able to either share that with the Committee on Education, or for us to forward it directly to the Department of Education? And also, I just wanted to find out, have you contacted the Western Cape Education Department to let them know about the risks regarding the particular schools? Are they aware of it? Because if they're aware of it, they can possibly assist you. But if they're not aware of it, I always tell people I can't help fix a problem if I don't know about the problem. So I would just like some more information about that. And then if you could please finally just also send us the police case number of the one employer suspected of fraud, because I do know case numbers should be public information. But if you could just maybe in writing send that to the committee members, if possible. And also you mentioned, okay, so that we have 54,981 employers. Does that correlate to the number of employers that DTIC and Stats picks up in our province? And out of that almost 55,000 employers, only one was suspected of fraud. Could you also just maybe indicate to us what is the average numbers in the other province, just so that we can have a bit of a comparison of how we are doing at the moment? I know those are a lot of questions, but Ms. Bronkhorst, I hope that you've written down as we were asking, and I will now allow you to either yourself or to allocate to colleagues for the answering of the questions, and then I'll open up for a second round or follow-ups if members have any. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start with the questions from the beginning that Mr. van der Westhuizen asked. Yes, it was a mammoth task for the UIF to change its systems. to change its processes to pay this. You will appreciate the fact that the UIF had to pay in the past anything between 8 and 10 billion rand a year in benefits, and all of a sudden we had to change our systems to pay benefits to the level of 60 billion. So it was a massive task. It has also been it was also a big task in terms of changing the systems, because the UIF pays individuals for their benefits. And here we had to change our system so that we could pay the employer to disperse the funding to the workers, because it was the easiest way to make sure that the money reached the pockets of the workers as soon as possible. So the delays caused by employers, the complaints of delays by employers, indeed, in the beginning it was slow, and still there are employers that will have challenges. If we cannot verify a bank account into which the payment must go, it delays the system. It delays the payment of the claims. If the employer has made a mistake on the claim, it delays, but we communicate, we put messages, we send messages to those employers next to the TARS, in the TARS portal next to the claim, to say what the challenges are that might be causing delays in terms of the payment. The databases, the various databases that we have are verified. You'll recall that the Auditor General had a first TARS audit where there was a substantial number of findings around non-verification of ID documents and so on. So we're getting a live dump of the Department of Home Affairs information on a daily basis, and the other smaller databases we get on a monthly basis. So we are verifying the data, which is predominantly the Home Affairs data. We get a dump on a daily basis. The issue of the paying of employers who was paying workers, there is no problem with employers who paid the workers in advance and stated such that it was an advance that was paid to workers because they were waiting for the TARS funding. There's no problem, and no employer will have a problem when the audit team comes to his workplace around this fact. Where the people were working and getting their salaries and the operation, the business was fully operational, that's a different scenario. But in this particular case, where the employer advanced the money to the workers, and they can show the auditors that this was an advance to the workers, waiting for the TARS, there will be no challenge at all, because we made provision for that. In terms of, excuse me, Ms. Nkontlo's questions, what does it mean when employees are not declared? When an employee starts employment with a worker, one of the mandatory statutory requirements is that the employer must inform the UIF that the worker has started work there, and what the starting date is of the employment, what the salary is of the employment, and so forth. That is what we call a declaration. It's informing the UIF that the worker has started employment. It's very important, because if this worker is claiming unemployment insurance benefits at the same time as working, there might be an overpayment of benefits, which then results in another challenge that this worker will be expected to refund. And we know people who have been unemployed might not necessarily always have the money, so on. So it's very important that the employer informs the UIF when a worker starts working. Then the data in terms of South African citizens versus foreign citizens, that is available. I'll make that available to the Secretariat of the committee. The sectors in terms of payments, yes, retail is under trade. Our sectors are much less than the other sectors that one would get at the at SARS in terms of SIPs, or even at the compensation fund. So retail sector falls under the trade. In terms of the fraud findings in the Western Cape, I said there was this one company. Since then, we have identified 2 more. And this one, particularly, the one was a company or employer who took a administration fee for paying the TARS money over. And the other one was an employer who claimed TARS money when the workers were already out of employment. And we are busy with those cases. They have been given to the South African Police Service for further investigation. The number of the reason for the decreasing applications that you see from April to October is simply because the economy opened up. We had the hard lockdown in April, but then in May we started going down to lower levels of lockdown and the economy opened up and more people returned to work. And it was not necessary for them to claim benefits. I think I'll explain the issue of the actual numbers and the unique numbers and the total numbers, if you'll allow me now. It'll also take care, Ms. Bartman, of your question. On slide 7, the unique numbers, it simply means that they were...
Ms. Bronkhorst, I see a hand in the chat. I just want to check quickly if it's a point of order. Member Maran, welcome to the committee. Do you have a point of order? Member Maran.
Morning, Chair. Thanks very much. Good morning to everyone, and my apologies for joining this meeting late. No, Chair. It's not a point of order. I just want to make you alert that my hand is up when the ladies finish. Maybe follow a question. Thanks.
No problem, Member Maran. We are just with the answering section of the first round of questions. I will recognize your hand as the first hand in the next set, in the next round of questions, if that's okay with you.
Okay, Madam Chair. Thanks very much.
No problem. Ms. Bronkhorst, you may go ahead. And can you please also just put up the slide 7 and 8 when you speak about those numbers, just so that we can also just try and understand the respective, because I know I try to explain the total and the unique, but if you can just assist me with that, please. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Matapelo, if you could please help us with sharing and then put up slide 7, please. Chair, I don't know if the Secretariat could perhaps, it seems as if there might be a challenge. I don't know if your Secretariat could perhaps assist me.
No problem. Ms. Adams, do you perhaps have the documentation in order to put it up?
Yes, Chair, I'll flag it now.
Okay, we're on slide 7. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let me just see.
Thanks.
Yes, there we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So in the Western Cape, I don't know, Chair, what happened now.
Ms. Adams, did you perhaps take the sharing off?
No, I think the previous presenter, person who was sharing the slides, shared over mine.
Okay, no problem. Okay, if you can maybe just put it back on, then we're able to just quickly continue with those numbers.
I must say, Chair, that this pandemic has taught all of us some patience. There we go.
Ms. Bronkhorst, I always say that, the pandemic has at least assisted us to get to certain parts in the digital age that we should have been at before COVID.
True.
Yes, there we go. Slides on now.
Thanks, thank you. So in the Western Cape, when I talk about unique numbers, it means there were 54,981 employers applying. They might have applied for more workers, but it's this one business who has got a registration number with the UIF. So 54,981 businesses that are registered with the UIF applied on behalf of their workers. And in these 54,000 workplaces, there were 1,109,000 unique ID numbers, meaning actual bodies, unique persons. Now, if we go to slide number number 8. Ms. Adams, please, now slide number 8. There we will see that we have, of that 1 million real people, there were 2.8 million applications. So there were a number of people who applied more than once for more than 1 month, perhaps for April, May, June, or July, or it could have been later on that they applied. So we received 2.8 million applications. Of the 2.8 million applications, we could pay 1.1 million workers. So we could not pay all the applications for the reasons that I have explained earlier. I hope that explains the issue of the unique versus the numbers that we have paid. So we received many more applications, but of those we could only pay 1.1 million for all the reasons that I have explained. If I can come to Ms. Bartman, the issue of employers who are claiming when they were not entitled, I fully agree with you. People must not break the law in an attempt to get benefits. Then also I've jumped a number of questions of Ms. Nkontlo. Let me just go back. I'm very sorry about that. The number of the payments that were made, there were also a question on the amount that was paid, this 10 million, and that it would look as if 10 billion, as it is a lot of money that was paid. The decision that was taken at the time by the NETLAC social partners was that no employee would be paid less than the minimum wage in terms of the DARS benefit. So irrespective of the contribution that the person received, none of them would receive less than 3,500 Rand per payment. And that also would add up to the amount that you see that is reflected there in terms of the payments that were made. If I now move to Ms. Bartman's questions, employers, the principle of labor legislation in our country is based on self-regulation. I don't think the Department of Employment and Labor nor the UIF will ever have enough inspectors to inspect each and every workplace every year. It's simply not possible. Therefore, we work on a basis of self-regulation. We also rely on our shop stewards, organized labor representatives, to also assist. We also do proactive inspections to educate employers and to make sure that employers comply. But I think the pandemic has been an event that never any one of us could have foreseen. And we never would have foreseen that it would be expected of the UIF to put systems in place to pay such a huge number of people to make a contribution to them to be able to continue living in the lockdown periods. So employers are educated. We do education during inspections. We do proactive information sessions. We do publications, etc. But employers must also self-regulate. We will not have the capacity ever to inspect each and every employer on an annual basis. I think I have explained the issue of the unique numbers and the unique and the applications that were made on page 7, slide 7 and slide 8. The monitoring of the payout to the employees in the memorandum of understanding, employers were expected to submit to the UIF within 5 days of receipt of the money proof that they have paid over the money to their employees. Now, there are employers who did that. There are unfortunately also employers who did not do that. And that is part of why we're having to do the follow the money process. We also had to decide whether we wanted to penalize workers because employers did not submit this proof to us, given the circumstances and the environment in which the fund and the country found itself at that time. So the decision was that we will pay the employers. Later on, a decision was taken that employees can provide their bank account so that the fund pays it directly into the bank account of the employees. So we corrected that. The complaints that some people were paid out and some people are not paid out, they're working for the same employer, is indeed possible, especially in the instance where the employer has decided or provided us with the banking account details of the workers themselves. And then that banking account detail fails verification. And here I would really want to again emphasize the matter. we would find that a bank account is opened in the name of MS Bronkhorst, for example, the account holder. But the name registered with the UIF is S Bronkhorst. And the name that is declared to the UIE on the TAS system might be N Bronkhorst. Then it fails bank verification. So we have had a number of challenges around the banking verifications, and we use the automated banking system to verify the banks. We've gone so far as to use the banks, to request the banks to manually verify their bank accounts. And we have gone so far as to call each and every failed banking account holder to ask them and take them through the hand-holding process to tell them where we're having the problem so that they can correct. Remember, the UIF is a third party, so we can't correct banking details and banking data. So we called these failed banking account holders and said to them, this is what's on our system. What is it in your bank account? Can you please correct that? And so to make sure that we can pay the workers as quickly as we can, or to make the payment in terms of the workers. The list of the visiting points and the service detail, I'll request the head of the Western Cape Province Department of Employment and Labour to provide that to the companies, to the Secretariat of the committee. Chairperson, the mock application and the TAS application, I will arrange, if you will allow me, I will engage with the Secretariat of the committee so that we arrange a time so that we set it up and take you through that. The verification of bank details, I think we have done, I have explained that in terms of how we contact the people, the entity, and or we contact the worker, we send emails, we make phone calls from our call center. We've got a specific project running just on the verification of bank details. We also uploaded on the TAS portal next to the application to say you failed the banking verification details and so forth. So we inform and communicate. We've lodged media publications, media events so that we inform people. We take this through to our social partners at NetLag and inform them, please can you help by informing your members that they must, if there's a failed banking verification, this is what they have to do. So we have done that. The issue of the schools applying for the TAS funding, we have not involved the Department of Education because we work with employers, individual employers. But I will follow up on that proposal that we see how we can do that in terms of the Western Cape Department of Education. The police case number for the one corrupt case, for the one alleged fraud and corruption case, I will inquire from the people working with that to provide us with that matter. Then I think I have the correlation of the number of employers with the Department of Training, DTIC and Stats. We work on numbers that are registered with the UIF, so we do not correlate the numbers at this stage with those departments. But it is a proposal that I will take forward. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think I've dealt with all the questions thus far.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bronkhorst. Okay, I will now take Member Moran's hand, but I just want to quickly see if there are any other members with follow-up questions or new questions, because I did indicate previously we would have time for a second round. Member van der Westhuizen, yes. Anyone else? Okay, then I will go after Member van der Westhuizen's questions. So Member Moran, Member van der Westhuizen, and then, okay, I see Member Nkontlo's hand, and then I'll go after Member Nkontlo then rather. Thank you so much, in that order.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. Hold me out of order, because as I've said, I've joined late. Chair, I just want to check, and I've heard now that out of the more than 54,000 employees, only one, and I think there's another two now, basically, that has also been picked up. We have sent through a number of complaints to the then UIF commissioner, and I think it was Marupeng, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a specific case last year, March, about KWV. And I also got emails to that effect where they basically admitted that the UIF paid more money than they were supposed to receive. This year again, and that was for the period, I think, for August, September month last year, but they've received the money this year. Again, KWV and PAL, and I'm not sure that the name that they trade under, I got it on my phone. Again, say to workers that the UIF TERS have paid more money than they are supposed to be paid. I fully understand the issue of advance payments, Chair. Fully understand that where the company may be paying advance and when the TERS money arrives, the company would basically deduct it. But this is not the case. Here is a case where, and even the CEO of KWV phoned me and said that there was a mistake on the TERS side. So I want to check on that particular matter whether money was paid back, because I've also spoke to the spokesperson of the minister, Jonathan Lewis, and they were on that particular case. Workers are claiming that money has not been paid back and the money is still in an account of KWV. Two amounts, one that they've received last year and one amount that they've received this year. And then there's a number of cases. I know, for instance, about schools. I'm fortunate to be elected a school governing body member at my school, where the school have applied, they have received monies, and by the time when the money arrives, the workers were gone. They were not there anymore, and they could not pay that monies out to those workers, of which I'm of the view they should have, because the period when they have applied for those workers, the workers were still employed by the school. The money is still in the account. The school is saying that they find it difficult to get hold of the UIF to pay that particular monies. Another case on some of the farms, and there's a specific farm not far from where I'm staying, where the farmer basically have claimed for their workers. Workers were off, but workers have never received these monies. There's also allegations that in that application that the farmer applies for himself, for his manager, and his wife. Right? But workers have never received this monies. And there's a number of those cases. One huge bus transport companies transporting school kids, more than 100 buses, more than 100 employees have applied. Right? And workers then go onto the system themselves and see that the employer have applied on their behalf, but they have never received the monies. And when we queried this with the bus company, they paid workers like in 2,000 rand, less than the minimum wage, because my understanding is you will not pay workers less than the 3,500, less than the minimum wage. And I also believe there was a cap, not more than a certain amount. But workers were only paid like in 2,000 rand, and they have never received, for instance, an advance payment, because it was, if you are at home, not in work, you will not receive any monies. Because remember, there was a time when school kids were at home and where bus drivers could not transport those kids. What do we do in those cases? Is there a contact details where we basically can forward those particular issues, complaints, and whether it will be investigated? Also, we would like to know, is it only certain cases that will be investigated? Is it all cases, complaints that the UIF received that will be investigated? Thanks.
Thank you so much. Member van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chairperson. My first question is just, did employers receive, together with the deposits, remittance advices indicating what amount is meant for what employee and which employees have not been verified, etc., so that they are able to reconcile the money that they've received in their bank accounts with the money that they have transferred or that they need to transfer. And if that there was a delay with those remittance advices, has that potential problem now been resolved? Can you assure us that all employers have received, such advices, enabling them then to transfer or to ensure that the right amount is transferred to the right people? The second one is just, Chair, in terms of the call center, I phoned the U-filing call center yesterday before 4 o'clock. That's the 0800 number. And I thought that perhaps I could just look on my phone for how long I had to hold the line. I eventually realized that it has now gone past 4 o'clock and that my call will probably not be answered. And my question is just, what is your experience in terms of people being able to reach you telephonically for such advice? Or is your call center, just inundated with calls every day and therefore unable to render the kind or level of service that I presume you would like to render? And my third and last question now, Chair, is it has been my privilege to serve on the then Portfolio Committee for Labour at the National Assembly for a while. And at the time, I was pleasantly surprised to see first the enormous early good bank balance of the Unemployment Insurance Fund. Now, obviously, you have probably actuarial requirements in terms of the amounts that you need to have. What is the current position of the Unemployment Insurance Fund's bank balance? Have you been assisted? Has these TERS money been transferred to you? And has money or a lack thereof ever been a problem during this whole process of paying out such huge amounts in such short time? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Member Nkondlo.
No, thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the responses. I think I've got a mix of follow-ups and new questions. One, I just want to understand in terms of the process map of the UIF, what will be your normal turnaround time of applying and finally getting the money deposited to one's account? And then in terms of the period of COVID, what has been the average times against that prescribed process map of the organization itself? And then in terms of what you have reported as a fraud and those that are not cooperating, I see in terms of verification, which I'm assuming, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm assuming the verification enabled the UIF to then pick up on the delinquent employers. Now, is it true, according to what you have presented, that to date, from the employers that have actually transacted in the Western Cape, you have only been able to verify only 45, and out of that, you are mentioning here that I think let me leave it there, because my take, according to I think one of the slides that indicates the fraud, is that there are 45 employers that have been verified, and actually 47,000 employees, 47.3 employees that has been actually involved, against the number as reported in slide 7 and I think 8 of the ones that you have actually processed. So, which then takes me to the question there, that is the verification process, is it still proceeding? Is the intention, to verify, all of the transactions, or a particular percentage. If one only now, within a number of 45 verified, you've picked up almost 3.8 million that has been involved, even with just one employer. So if you can just clarify for me, if indeed the verification process is still in progress, or it was just you've just selected only that 45. And by virtue of what you have seen, can you then say that the system, this system of the UIF of claims, is open to fraud and manipulation, especially because, as you were indicating, because of self-regulation, relying on employee reps and the likes, that you can only pick this up post facto. So what has it told you, and is there any improvement, I think, with your experiences and lessons that you have learned, in trying to tighten the system where there is some type of verification of the information even before you can actually, as part of processing, and before you can actually make the payments, because now it means you must then recoup the money after you've already paid, and that on its own is going to cost the state, because obviously now there's an SIU that must be involved in this one case. You're going to go to court and all of that. And I mean, what will be the cost to the state of recouping a money that the state, unfortunately, during the process, was opened up to fraud? So I just want to understand whether indeed, are you seeing that your systems are open to fraud and manipulation, and therefore is there any mechanisms that you have put in place going forward to correct and improve? If so, what are those? And in the explanation you gave me about, the workers that are declared, and that which means is declaration equal to registration to the UIF? If you understand what I'm asking, would an employer be registered for UIF, and therefore, as you are saying, not declare the worker? So it means I as an employer, I can have 5. I could be registered as an employer because that's a requirement, and I've got 10 workers, and out of the 10 workers, I would have only declared only 5, and the other 5 is not declared. So is that what it means in terms of this? And once again, how do you close that particular gap? Because what it would mean, and actually in some of the cases that we've seen, what it would mean that you've got a number of employees that are in the system, that is in our labor market system, but they are not declared. And at this point, are you able to quantify that particular problem of non-declarations, especially of those workers that are, or employees that are legally within the right of being declared for UIF? Do you have that? And if you do, I just want to know what's the level of that non-compliance from employers at this point, and what is being done to actually correct now that you have picked it up. My last one is, in terms of, I hear you saying, in terms of the principle of the payments during COVID, no one would have been paid less than 3.5. Is it possible for you to tell me what would be the lowest amount paid to an employee, and what would be the highest amount? Was it the same amount that was paid to employees from this 10-point-something billion rands, or there's variance? And if so, what will be, if one, I'm just looking at an average that was received by the employers at any given time of payments, between your lowest amount to the highest amount? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Member Nkondlo. I'm just going to lower your hand quickly so that in case there are any follow-up questions later. Okay. My follow-up questions, Ms. Bronkhorst, I'm not sure if you've answered it, but if you can just maybe let me know. I'm not sure if you gave me the comparison of the fraud cases of the other provinces, but if you did, please just refresh my memory regarding that. And then you indicated the UIF is a third party and it can't correct banking data. Now, in my mind, the UIF is an entity and an organ, part of the organs of state. It's even if it is under the Department of Labor, there's no reason why, in my mind, you can't partner, for example, with DTIC and SARS, and why you can't get that extra information for verification, because you don't necessarily, as an entity, need to verify the information yourself. Because when you type in your tax information, SARS can easily see through different applications whether your information is correct or not. And in fact, on your SARS information, there are categories that you can't actually change yourself because SARS has already verified it. So in my mind, there shouldn't be a problem with partnering with other government organizations to get this respective information, and to ensure that your application forms and the way that it is set up online is already in such a state where if DTIC says this business is a registered business and it is active, that information can't be filled in automatically when that business apply for a F. But can you just please explain what does it mean when you say you are a third party and you can't verify the specific information? Because even if you are an industry that is self-regulated, there are many other industries that are also self-regulated, but that information through the other governmental departments, one can verify automatically. So I don't understand that argument. And then the website of UIF and the application process is not very user friendly. You have these long in Afrikaans, like I would have said, ellenlange documentation that people essentially has to read through, but it doesn't really explain in layman's terms how to apply or what one is supposed to do. So is there a way, and this will probably relate to your branding and marketing team, which, you know, most departments have some people there, how to make the website and the application process much more user-friendly, while the SARS, I think pretty recently I also actually gave SARS some advice on making their website user-friendly, but their website, for example, is much more user-friendly than the UIF and the Department of Labor's website. So perhaps there can be some between SARS, DTIC and UIF, some combination of working group to make the website and the application process much better, because it is not at this stage. And then second last question. I wanted to find out, we are going to obviously have a public hearing, which you know about, where we're going to ask respective people, whether they're employees or employers or stakeholders, to come and tell us about their experience with the UIF. And I just wanted to find out from you, is there any particular information that you require for when we receive complaints or input, that when we forward it to you, that you require specific information in order to deal with the respective question? Because, for example, if Deirdre complains that the UIF has been taking 2 weeks to respond to my request, what is the 100% definite information that you need in order to deal with that request, just so that when we deal later with the deliberations on public participation, that we also have an idea of what the requirements are, so that we can get some of the red tape cut between yourselves and our province. And then finally, what is the current backlog of applications within the UIF in the Western Cape? And what is the effect that it has had, the COVID TERS, on the other applications? For example, if I've applied for maternity leave and I've now applied also for my UIF benefits, which are not COVID specific benefits. So is there a backlog of those type of applications? And if so, what are the backlog? I don't know if there's other applications unrelated to UIF TERS that you're currently dealing with, but if you can just give us an idea of what the backlog is at the moment. And then just, Member Moran, you've indicated three or four specific what do you call it, scenarios to the UIF, could you also maybe just send through that information to Ms. Bronkhorst? And Ms. Bronkhorst, if you could just maybe provide your contact details for us, so that if there are members who have specific queries about specific companies, to deal with those directly. But you can also obviously deal with those questions in general if you don't have the specific information. But thank you so much. Member Moran, I just want to quickly find out from you if you've sent through the information to the UIF yet.
We have sent it. Thanks, Chairperson. We have sent it to the then UIF commissioner, and I've said, and if I can remember, his name was Maruping Lapueng, something like that. The person here from the UIF can just assist. We have sent it. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. Bronkhorst. If you can then just deal with those as well, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Maron, I think I'll have to ask you to submit or give me the information again. You'll appreciate the fact that I have been acting here in this position and we're all aware of the circumstances. So I'd really appreciate it if you can let me have the information. I'll give you the contact detail of the project manager for all these kinds of complaints, so that he can follow it up and we can prioritize these investigations. And I just want to clear one, perhaps I did not express myself properly. We have prioritized the employers in terms of the follow the money, as I explained, and this also goes for the question, I think, of Ms. Nkontlo. All employers will be audited. The UIF is adamant that we'll audit all employers, but we had to look at it on a risk basis. Start with the biggest employers, the employers that were identified in the audit of the Auditor General as potential problematic employers, auditors where we have employers where we have picked up in our risk unit that there was untoward activities and so forth. Given the constraints in terms of time and so on, I would much rather we audit an employer with 2,000 employees than a spaza shop on the corner with one employee, perhaps. The risk-based approach will dictate that. But all employers will be audited to make sure that we get the money that is due to the UIF and all the workers, that it gets paid to the workers. You raised the issue of a farmer that said school, I think you said, that had left, say the workers have left and they can no longer pay them. That is incorrect. The employer that claimed for them, he must trace the workers and pay the money to the workers, because they are entitled to that money, even though they might not necessarily currently be in employment, because they were in employment at the time when the claim was lodged for them. So they have to pay the money to them. All the companies, in terms of the farm workers and all the other companies, employers that you have complaints about, please, I'll give you the name of someone who can assist with prioritizing these investigations in that particular area. Mr. Van der Westhuizen, the employers have received, we have on the TARS portal, a very nice explanation of who the money is for. The workers' details are there, the amount is there. It's also indicated when the money is for which month the money is paid for. So the employer must just access the TARS portal under their employer reference number with their password, and the information is provided there. In terms of the call center, we are busy switching call centers from the call center that we had to a new call center that should start on Monday. And this week we have a slower turnaround time in terms of responding to calls. We have made information available around that. Under the normal circumstances, when our call center is not switching, we respond to a call within 20 seconds. So it's unfortunate that you didn't call last week. You would have had a better experience. But having said that, we're busy this week with switching call centers to come to a better service, a more integrated and a more up-to-date call center service. The bank balance of the UIF, well, you can appreciate the fact that if we spend 60 billion rands on TERS benefits, that our bank balance have decreased with 60 billion rands. We do not have money problems at the moment. We'll be able to meet our liabilities in terms of our statutory obligations for benefits, but we will not be able to continue paying TERS benefits forever and a day. We must realize that the purse of the UIF is exactly like your and my purse. We can only spend what we have. And we would not want to exceed the money that we have already spent, because then it means we will have to start looking at worker credits. And that is something that I really do not want to do. I do not want to be in a situation where we cannot pay unemployed people benefits because we have exhausted the funds of the UIF on the TERS benefit. But at this stage, the UIF can definitely cover its liabilities and it for what it is to pay. Ms. Nkontlo, the UIF pays 90% of its claims within 15 working days. But with the lockdown period, the Department of Employment and Labour, who is our service delivery arm, has had exactly the same impact as any other workplace. There was also a hard lockdown. There's also a limit of numbers of people who can go to the workplace because of the social distancing, etc. So our turnaround time for the last year went down to 87% of statutory claims. And with statutory, I mean the unemployment, the in-service benefits, and the dependent benefits. But it does have an influence. We have enabled people to work from home. We have done what we could in terms of getting the work off. But there is a reality that when there is a positive case, for example, in a workplace, that office must close for it to be disinfected and so on. And it does impact on turnaround times. And if we go into a hard lockdown, it's going to be exactly the same again. As much as we would want to work, we will also have challenges in terms of doing it. The issue of the employers that we verified only 45, I think I've responded to that in terms of that we will verify all the information of all employers, but in the Western Cape, we identified these first 45 as priority cases in terms of the criteria that we set ourselves. The system of the UIF is a system that is based on information input by employers. And you will recall that with the first audit of the Auditor General, there were quite a number of system loopholes, if I can call it that, which was open and made it open for us to pay out money that was not employers and employees were not entitled to. The system has been enhanced, and we have had a much improved audit so that we can say now our checks and balances have improved. But with any system, no system is foolproof. If someone wants to do something which is illegal, they will be able to do it if they spend enough time and energy in doing so. The issue of a workers' declaration, whether that equates to registration, that is correct. An employer can be registered with a fund and he can only declare 5 of his 10 workers in the example you used. What then happens is that when the worker comes to the offices of the department and he claims for his benefits, we will pick up that the employer has not declared. An inspector will be dispatched and the employer will have to pay back the outstanding contributions plus penalties plus arrears that have not been paid for the particular employer. So we do that, and when we pick up, we will not penalize the employee. We will never penalize the employee. If we can see that the employee has contributed to the fund, the employer failed to pay over the money, we will penalize the employer, and we will put quite substantial interest and penalties to the employer for failing to do his legal duty. The issue of the payments, we paid the lowest money was 3,500, as I said, because we said no worker will get less than the minimum wage. And then, excuse me, then the payment would depend, the highest payment would depend on what the employee was earning and contributing to the fund in the months before the lockdown. Because we could not say what was your average salary in the months before you claimed for the TARS, because people were not earning a salary. And that means we would have had to pay people nothing. So the fund with the social partners at NEDLAC decided we would use the average salaries prior to March last year to pay a worker. So your span will be between 3,500 and then depending on what the salary was up to the limit that the benefit we pay. Ms. Bartman, the comparison of fraud cases versus other provinces, I think I did forget. I will provide that information to you. I think I did not express myself properly. As a third party, we do not verify the information. As a third party, we cannot change the banking information. We can only call the claimant and say to the claimant, this is the banking information we have on our system. Please, can you check that it is correct and correct that information? But we cannot change. But I take your point of working or engaging SARS and DTIC. I think I have already said it's a good idea that we will investigate. The issue of the website, I also think that it was a comment more. I take note of that, and I'll talk to my system developers to see how we can make it more user-friendly. In terms of public hearings, it would be very important for us. The least we need is the identity number of a claimant and where this person applied and when, and then the reference number of an employer. But what I think I would do is I would rather send you a list of the information that we need in order to be able to respond to a particular complaint but the very least is the identity number of the claimant, because we work on identity numbers at the UIF when we deal with claims. We need that. We need when the application was made and where, because statutory benefits are decentralized to the province. So all claims for unemployment, maternity, illness, and dependence benefits get dealt with by your provincial office in Cape Town and by the processing sites I have responded to. TARS benefits have been centralized here at the UIF head office because of the nature of the benefit and that it is not a permanent benefit. So that would be important for us to get that. So when you have your public hearings, it would be very important that you have to invite people from the Provincial Department of Employment and Labour, because they're the ones who deal with those claims. I think that takes care of the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, we do still have time. Are there any follow-up questions? I see Member van der Westhuizen's hand. Okay, Member van der Westhuizen, you can go ahead. And yes. Then Member Maran and Member Nkondlo also has a question. Perfect, in that order.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, I think one of the things which we've learned today is that it seems as if there's a lack of compliance with the rules regarding the registering of employees with the Unemployment Insurance Fund. And if I'm incorrect, please, Ms. Bronkhorst, you must correct me, which then seems to me as if there is a serious, and I think you referred to it before, Chairperson, we need a communication campaign, but it also seems to me that, it cannot only be carrots, there will have to be some stick, unfortunately, as well. So my first question is just, to what extent do you have inspectors? To what extent do you work with the General Labour Inspectorate? And what has been your experience up to now? Has this been a surprise to you that there is such a high level of non-compliance in terms of registering people for the Unemployment Insurance Fund? My second question is just, Chair, and again, I'm grateful to hear that call centre is normally as effective as Ms. Bronkhorst indicated. I can just indicate to her that being unable to get through on the call centre, I sent an email after you filing support at UIF, and I do hope that that service is also is not disrupted as the call center. And perhaps Ms. Bronkhorst can just tell me whether I would be able to, within a day or two, expect a return email on my email, or has that also been affected by this changeover of call center? Then, Chair, if we could just get an indication then of what would the approximate current bank balance be of the Unemployment Insurance Fund? And then lastly, Chair, is Mr. Marupeng still on the payroll of the Unemployment Insurance Fund as a commissioner? If not, when was his services terminated? I may just point out, Chair, that he was apparently suspended at the beginning of September, which means that we are now in the 9th month. And obviously, I realize that Ms. Bronkhorst is in a disadvantaged position, and therefore I'm not asking her to respond to any merits of the case, but just to confirm whether Mr. Marupeng is still on the payroll of the UIF, or whether his services have been terminated. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Member van der Westhuizen. Member Maran.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I fully agree with the Honourable van der Westhuizen that it seems there is I'm not sure whether I can call it a problem, but a failure, and I'm glad that the acting commissioner have said that workers will not be punished where UIF has been deducted but not paid over to the UIF by the employer. And we have picked up a number of those cases when workers basically got fired or resigned. They will then, when they apply for the UIF, submitting the UI90s, they will then find out that there was no payment over to the UIF. I just want to check with the acting commissioner the contact details of the project manager where we can submit this information, whether she will give it to us in this meeting, or whether she will give it to the procedural officer and the procedural officer will make it available to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Maran. And with your last question, Member Maran, I'm just going to ask that because we've asked for a number of things from the UIF, which includes various contact details and things, that the procedural officer just gets all of that information for us and send it in one email to the members, the same way, for example, that she would send a committee invite. So just so that we all have that information in case also we want to send it to our constituencies, or if people want to submit complaints and systems, if that will be okay with you, Member Maran.
Chairperson, yes, I'm more than happy that we should happen that way. But also just to remind the procedural officer that I'm not a member of this committee, but she should include me in the mails that will be sent out.
Okay. Okay, no problem. That is perfectly fine. It also does go out to alternate members, but I will just also remind the procedural officer just to also put you on the mailing list so that everyone can get it. Okay, Member Kontlo.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the responses. I think for me, Chair, this time around, from the commissioner, I think in my questions, I think some of the questions she chose to answer them in a very general way than providing the specifics that I was asking. One, I am sure by now with payments, you would know what is the lowest amount, which if it is 3.5 as declared, that is on the figures, because now we're talking in hindsight. And what is the highest amount paid? It can't be that it will depend and all of that, because I'm not asking a theoretical question here. I'm just asking specifics of what has been done to date, unless that information is not available now and the commissioner can forward it later. Number two, the issue of the gaps in the system. I think in general terms, we know that there is no system that is foolproof. I'm not looking for that answer. I'm looking now with what has happened, that the state through the UIF now must take the matters through SIU. There's a verification that needs to be done. Is there or unless the commissioner is telling me that from the UIF point of view, together with the Department of Labour, they don't see anything wrong with this. You know, they feel that their system, there's nothing to improve. It's going to remain like this because in any way, there's no system that is foolproof. The reality here, we're just trying to look at the very little resources that the state has. What is the most efficient ways of ensuring that we deliver services, you know, and we do not end up, you know, getting other costs, you know, because of systems failures. So my question was more about, given the experience, because indeed COVID has been an experience in terms of the pressure to the different departments and their service delivery models. So my question is specific to that. And I'm saying at this point, I'm not hearing a specific answer. I'm hearing that it's a general thing. So if it is, are we saying, if anything were to happen, this is what is going to happen to the UIF system? There's nothing at this point. You're saying because the system, you know, depends on employers submit the information. There is nothing now that you've picked up that some employers, you know, have abused the system. Some of the employers, you had now to spend another resources to verify them at a later point. So the UIF does not see at this point any intention of actually improving on the system. And I think that is actually what I'm actually looking for at this point, because indeed this was exposed now that the system can be manipulated. That is why you are sitting with cases of fraud. And I think that is what I'm looking at this point, is some indication that the UIF is dealing with a matter. If it's not a matter that must be dealt with by the UIF, I'm sure this should be a matter that even ourselves as the committee will then have to elevate to the Department of Labour, so that we reduce the cost of doing business or the cost of providing services or the UIF benefit to employees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Ms. Bronkhorst, if I can maybe just make it a bit easier for you. You mentioned obviously there by Member Nkondo's question that the minimum is 3,500, but then you said that the highest payment depends on what the employee was paying average the months before lockdown. Is there a cap? And maybe that will assist us. What is the exact amount? So Member Nkondo is just asking for an amount. What is the highest amount you will pay out? And then even though part of the second question you kind of did answer when I asked about partnering with DTIC and SARS, essentially what on the system are you improving? If there's fraud and manipulation, then surely there's a problem in the system. So what are you doing about making sure that that doesn't happen again on the system based on what you've seen so far? Ms. Bronkhorst, I'm hoping that you maybe understand those particular ones a little bit better now. And then obviously the other questions, you can obviously also deal with them accordingly.
Chairperson, thank you. I'm going to ask, I see Mr. Ragavalu has joined us in the meeting, that he takes the members through the details in terms of the system enhancements and so forth. Before I give you information which might not be accurate. But let me just talk a little bit, if you will allow me, about the issue of the lack of registration. Mr. van der Westhuizen, indeed, the inspectors of the Department of Employment and Labour does work for the UIF, checks compliance, etc., as well as we have in all the provinces what we call UI auditors, who go to employers and audit the books, do full payroll auditing to make sure that the payrolls are correctly paid and the contributions are done. But as I have said when we started, we will never have enough inspectors. So it is a problem in terms of if an employer is unscrupulous, then it does become a problem in terms of the declarations if he fails to declare, and then it becomes after the event enforcement process when the worker comes to us and then claims. Mr. Maruping is still on suspension. The case is still being finalized by the Special Investigating Unit, and we're waiting for the final reports for whatever the recommendations might be that they say will be, or what the actions are that they want us to take or recommend us to take. So as you said, I cannot say anything about the merits of the case, but he is still on suspension. we have recalled some of the other senior officials that were on suspension back to work. Then the issue of U-filing. U-filing is linked, unfortunately, to the call center. So I'm sorry that you might have to wait a little bit longer, Mr. van der Westhuizen, for us to finalize all the crossover to the new call center. The contact details, I will send those with all the other information to the Secretariat. Ms. Nkondlo, I think I did not understand your question properly, and thank you for the chairperson for explaining that you want the top cap. I'll ask Mr. Ragavalu to talk about this as well as all the enhancements that we have done in terms of taking this system. I just want to talk one other question, that what the pandemic has also taught us is that the databases of the various government departments are not linked and they don't talk to one another. So it's not possible for any department to access an ID number without going to the Department of Home Affairs, if I can use that as an example. So the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation has started with this project where we are going to look at one common database for all government departments in the Republic, so that when a person comes to GTIC, for example, inputs a number, it automatically pulls through to the Unemployment Insurance Fund, to the Compensation Fund, SARS, wherever else it's got to go. So that project has been started and they are working on that project, and the UIF is also represented there. So if you will allow me, Mr. Ragavalu, to take us through in terms of the lowest amount and then the cap of 17,000 and the percentage that we pay, as well as the enhancements that we have done when we picked up that there were some issues. Chairperson, if you'll allow him to come with the detail.
Ms. Bronkhorst, before Mr. Ragavalu goes ahead, you just you missed one question from Member Westhuizen, and that was, what is your current bank balance at the UIF?
Oh,
yes.
Sorry for that.
I think Mr. Ragavalu can take over.
Okay, the current bank balance, and this includes all our investments and so forth. So it's not necessarily money that's immediately available. Lies at just over 100 billion rand. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then Mr. Ragavalu, you can now go ahead. But Ms. Bronkhorst, I think when we get the information for obviously going to go do unscheduled oversight visits, as well as the information when we can maybe do a mock application session like this, and the respective details, I think perhaps with the UIF, we also need a session, or perhaps with that mock application session, we need a session then with the Department of Planning and Monitoring for what they're doing in terms of that project to get all the information together. Because you are one government. It's literally, UIF is a national entity, Department of Labour is a national entity, a department, SARS is national, DTIC is national, Department of Planning and Monitoring, it's one government, Home Affairs is one government. So it doesn't make sense for there to be different information on different people on different databases. I mean, Estonia is essentially the same age as South Africa, who became a democracy in 1994. And because they could not afford the infrastructure and things for a democracy, they went digital years and years ago. And now Estonia, for example, is so advanced in their IT system that they have the international cybersecurity in their country. So I do think that with the respective departments that this is a project that should have been dealt with previously, but perhaps we should have a briefing on the matter. But Mr. Ragavalu, if you could please address Member Kondlo's questions then for us, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, UIC and the chairperson. I think the first thing in terms of the cap salary is 17,712. That is, if a person is earning above that, it is always brought down to the cap salary of 17,712. The sliding scale is from 38 to 60%. Now, in terms of the maximum we can pay, the maximum we can pay per day is 221 rands and 28 cents. And roughly over 30 days, it's 6,730 rands. Now, the reason why I say 221 rands per day is that depending on the lockdown period, because even though we might have an iteration, and the iteration is a payment month from the 1st of May to 31st May, you could have the possibility that the individual or the employer is only claiming for 10 days. So in terms of our calculation formula, it is capped at 221 rands 28 cents per day. And whenever we pay, we take into account the minimum wage. The daily minimum wage is 115.07. So if we're paying a day or a number of days, then for a day, it should not be less than 115.07. However, we do take into account if the employer pays the employees a certain amount during that iteration month. And then we look at the formula that what is received by the UIF and what is paid by the employer should not be more than 115.07, the minimum wage. Now, coming back to the question on the enhancement to the system, we look at it at two levels in terms of the AG's finding, and also we look in terms of our own improvements, and also we take into account in terms of the new phase, which is phase 2, the sector-based and the non-sector based, and which I will cover as the last point. Now, in terms of the AG's finding, they gave us areas of improvements. The first areas of improvement is the external source in terms of databases, where we went and obtained or have linkages with OMOFERS, that we get a regular updates of OMOFERS. We're looking at SARS, we have linkages with SARS, we have linkages with DPSA, and we have linkages with SASA. Now, these external data source will assist us in verification or validating the claims made by either the employer themselves or the representative by the employer. For example, if we have an ID number, we match that ID number against the database of OMOFERS to indicate whether it's a valid ID number. If it's a valid ID number, then that process continues with the various other business rule checks before the person is qualified for payment or not. Then in terms of the bank verification, the bank verification was divided into 3 portions in terms of improvement to the system. Employees that have a CIPC numbers, trade name, and you're also looking at ID numbers. Now for ID numbers, we looked for example, a domestic employer, or you're looking, for example, a sole ownerships, because in the sole ownership of or a domestic employer, we do not have CIPC. And for trade names, as I said, it's for mostly in terms of a trust, NGOs, etc. So in that individual, when this information is supplied by the employer or representative of the employers, then we check the banking details against the CRPC numbers, and that should have the same sequence as what is reflected in the various commercial banks. And if it's a perfect match, then the commercial banks will indicate yes, and then we move forward. But as I said, we also use other verification sources. So those were the improvements in terms of validation and verification claims by employees. And when you look in terms of this phase 2, where you're looking at the sector base and you're looking at the non-sector base, the sector base in terms of the directive, only certain business establishments are entitled to go through by the TAS portal. And I will come those that do not qualify under the TAS portal, what's the provision for them. And that in terms of, we use the sector industrial codes, and the sector industrial codes we obtain from South African Revenue Services. So if a business entity says, I'm in a restaurant, I'm in accommodation, then we look for that is registered with South African Revenue Services. And if it's a perfect match, then it goes through to make an application. If it's not a perfect match, then the application is denied. However, we do have in terms of appeal process, if a person is not satisfied and feel that the decision is not in his favor. So in terms of our improvements and effectiveness, as I said, we are fully linked with South African Revenue Services, not only on the sector, but also on the registration of that employee in terms of contributions made by South African Revenue Services that is deposited into the unemployment insurance fund. So you look at the employee, you look at the contributions part of it paid by South African Revenue Services, and if it gives us a yes, and then it goes to in terms of the further checks in terms of business rule and paid by the employee. In terms of the non-sector base, in terms of the improvements done there, and if you look at non-sector base in terms of phase 2, you're looking for the vulnerable in terms of age, you're looking at comorbidities, and you're looking at isolation and quarantine. And here we're matching information or claims lodged by employees against information that we have from Department of Health in terms of being more effective, that we do not pay people or do not pay employees that do not qualify, both in the sector and in the non-sector basis. And as I said, the various findings by AG or in terms of improvements that was fully complimented as a given. Chairperson, I will stop there unless there's further clarity needed on the response given.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ragavalu. I think maybe from my side, just something I picked up what you said is that you still check and verify, even though you get information from the other systems, where actually what you guys should be doing is getting the information, and then if the information, and it must be automatically on the system, and then if the information is wrong, the business actually needs to change the information with SARS or SIPS and not with the UIF. But I do think that is something that you're going to need to look at in the improvements that you're currently making, because it also doesn't help that 3 different government entities are checking the same information. You're creating unnecessary work for yourselves. But colleagues, with that, I'm going to ask that if there's any other follow-up questions or new questions, that we please put those in writing and that we forward those to the UIF and or other respective departments, and that we now discuss the way forward for public participation. Colleagues, I see Member van der Westhuizen's hand.
Thank you, Chair. I see it's not only me that have got some hardy-das around. Chair, can I just say, and I think before we say goodbye to the representatives of the Unemployment Insurance Fund, while I think we and many others have been highly critical of the way in which this TERS funding has been handled, it has made a huge contribution, and as she has pointed out, also to the Western Cape economy and to alleviate a lot of hardship for a lot of people. That is actually why we are so concerned that, you know, there have been some delays and backlogs, etc. But I think we need to acknowledge the valuable contribution of this initiative to the South African economy at a time when things could and would have been a lot worse if it wasn't for this scheme. And from my side, I just would like to say thank you to them, and we really hope that the problems that they are experiencing would be resolved soon. They are a very, very important entity for our country, and they are deserving of all our support, and we trust that they will receive the necessary attention from central government. Thank you.
Thank you, Member van der Westhuizen. I'm just going to ask that if I can just get a moment to thank the members for being online with us today, then I'll be able to go forward to the public participation discussion. But Member Moran, I see your hand. Is that a new question? Is it?
No, Chair, as I've said, I've joined the meeting late because I wanted to know exactly the issue that you have raised now. This committee have taken a decision sometime, not so long ago, about the public participation process. And yeah, but it seems you're going to deal with that now. Thanks.
Yes, okay. So for those who are not part of the previous meetings, let me just quickly explain while the UIF is still online. Previously, our committee has resolved to have public hearings in our province, which is the Western Cape, on the impact of the UIF and how various different stakeholders have experienced the payouts of the UIF TERS funding specifically. So not everything that the UIF does, specifically COVID TERS funding. Okay. In that process, today's briefing is the briefing so that we as members can also understand the respective processes. The discussion we're going to have now after this is a discussion for how the public participation process is now going to be proposed to work, and I will obviously then get the input and suggestions from members. And that's also where my question came in to the acting commissioner on what information they specifically require in order to make sure that when we do get input from stakeholders, that we are able to actually deal with those respective input and complaints that we've received. So that will be the discussion after this, and our procedural officer will also be assisting us with the particular procedures in terms of our rules in order for us to make this as effective as possible But Member Moran, I hope this answers your question regarding the public participation. Okay, I'm going to assume that it does answer the question on the public participation process, which we will deal with now. Ms. Bronkhorst, for yourself and for your team, thank you so much for being online with us today. The impact of the UIF on our province has been quite severe in terms of the payout to employers as well as to employees. And where there is backlogs, where there are problems, we need to be able to deal with them as speedily as possible in order to ensure that everyone has fair treatment of these benefits that they are entitled to. But with that, I will now excuse the UIF from the meeting, and the committee will continue with the public, the discussion regarding the public participation process. Obviously, it is a public meeting, so if the UIF would like to stay on, you are more than welcome to do so as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the members. Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. Member Moran, your hand is still up. Is it a previous round's hand or is it a new hand?
No, it's an old hand.
Old hand, no problem. Thank you so much. Okay. Colleagues, we will now be discussing the way forward for the public participation process. Just open up here quickly. Okay. So colleagues, there are a few things that we need to discuss. So I will discuss with you and put forward for you proposals for newspapers that we can advertise in, and then we also need to discuss matters such as infographics and social media. We also need to discuss the manner of submissions and deadline, as well as possible dates for the public hearing, as well as working with DS South Africa, and I'll also allow our procedural officer to also come in here because they worked with DS South Africa on the ad hoc committee, and luckily the procedural officer with us also assisted the ad hoc committee with public hearings, so they also have previous experience with some of these issues. And then colleagues, we also need to discuss some of the questions that we would like to be asked to the public when we put out the advertisement. And this is also where those questions come in. For example, please give us the reference number of the application, please give us the ID number, and so on. But colleagues, what I'll start with first is the questions that we would like to ask in terms of the public hearings, because also depending on how much we want to ask, I think what the deadline will be then will also stem from this, just so we can also give stakeholders enough time in order to submit their particular submissions. But with that, I will take hands now for specific things that members would like to see in the questions. And then I also think what we can do is once we have determined these, we can also ask the procedural officer and even if the legal office, if there's any particular legal matters, that we can also, just have them check the questions that they are written correctly for the public. But I see Member van der Westhuizen's hand. Are there any other hands? Okay, if not, Member van der Westhuizen, you can go ahead so long.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You're a bit quick on us this morning. Can I just quickly say, I think that the one thing that we must ask is, or a number of questions, is obviously first to determine whether people have submitted a claim or claims. Secondly, do they feel that they've received enough guidance in completing those claims and what the criteria would be for those claims to be successful? Have they experienced any delays in receiving the money, and perhaps one could say, delays more than 21 days or so in receiving that money? Then also, Chair, I'm still interested to hear what the public's perception is, or their version of the remittance advices. Have you received remittance advices indicating clearly to you which of your employees' claims have been successful? For what months have they been successful? Have you been aware of the website where such information can be verified? And then, Chair, I would also like to people just in general to inform us where have they learned of the TERS funds and the availability of this support, and whether the website, guided them in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any other suggestions before I put my suggestions? Okay, if none, I have some suggestions. Member van der Westhuizen, I see your hand is up again. Member, okay, the hand is done. Okay.
Apologies, I thought I had not yet lowered it. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Colleagues, I do think there are some 100% definite specifics that we do have to ask. For example, I do think that we have to say, for example, in the questions, are you a business or are you someone applying from the Western Cape? Because otherwise we might end up getting submissions from across South Africa instead of just Western Cape submissions. And I do think this is something that we saw in the ad hoc committee when Dear South Africa changed some of the questions as well as just put it out to everyone. And our procedural officer through the Public Education Office has also engaged Dear South Africa to tell them that we are going to be running this process. If they please could just work with us in terms of ensuring that one, our questions aren't changed, and two, that they do indicate that this is for Western Cape specifically, and that also that we're dealing specifically with COVID-19 TERS funding. Because if someone sends in information regarding other UIF things, I do believe we'll still be able to escalate that to the UIF. But given that we've indicated on a resolution that we're specifically doing the public hearings on UIF TERS funding, that we do need to make that clear in the questions. So those are the first, that it must be Western Cape, that it must be COVID TERS funding. And then also we need to, I believe that we have to ask is, if you've made the application, they have to give us their reference number. Because it also doesn't help we complain to the UIF about TERS funding not being paid out if we don't have the reference number. And for example, the acting commissioner said that we need to give them the ID number, please. And then of that, they have to let us know, I believe, that how many applications have they made for the months that they've made it, obviously. Have the applications been approved? Which months have been approved of those applications and paid out? So that's a little bit similar to Member van der Westhuizen's question. And the time delay in the applications being made and it being paid out. Now, I know Member van der Westhuizen mentioned 21 days, but to my knowledge, the amount of money that has been paid out, sorry, there's a rooster that's next door at the neighbor's house that keeps making noise. But there's you have to pay it out within 5 days. So I do think that when we ask if there's a delay, that we ask specifically how many working days that delay was, that people have to physically type in the number of working days. And then the payout of the TERS money, I believe that if the money has been paid out, they have to indicate the percentage and the amount of the money that has been paid out. And for example, they must indicate, okay, we've applied for, let's say, 10 employees, but only 3 employees have been paid out. The other 7, for example, have not been paid out. Here are the details that we need to send to the UIF for those to be paid out, the employees. And we also need to, I believe, indicate in our submission, are you an employer or employee that is making the submission? Because we also need to, for example, where an employer has not paid money over to an employee, we need to be able to, in our questions, ask the employee, okay, please give us the information of the employer where you believe that the money has not been paid over yet. What is your details? The company details, your ID number, and so on, so we can send that to the UIF. Because as I said previously, it also doesn't help we complain to the UIF about certain things, but we don't give them the exact information. I do know that the acting commissioner has said that she'll also send us some information about where and when applied for this particular UIF, so I think we should probably put that in as well. But also if we can just, with with your permission, also then include what the UIF then sends to us if we have not put that already in our questions. Members, if you can maybe just indicate if you agree with those suggestions, if you have any edits, if you would like different questions and so on, or if there's something that we might have missed in terms of the questions. We can always give ourselves a deadline by when we can submit the questions that we think we should be asking. If I could just get an indication from members on how they feel. Okay, members, I'm going to then assume that you agree with everything that I'm saying. Member Maran, your hand is up.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. Look, Chair, I don't think we expect for this process to be 100% to be perfect, because it won't. I'm comfortable with the questions that we want to put within this advertisement, but we must also have the understanding that there might be questions that might be outside of that and how we want to deal with those particular ones. I don't think it should be cast in stone and say that it must be within this questions that has been asked. It might be something that we have left out, and a person might basically raise a particular question and how we will deal with that particular issue. I think we should be open for that, Chair. Chair, also, the advertisement, whether it will be in the newspapers, social media and so forth, whether we also can receive those and send it directly to some of those who have complained, because it might be that they will be not be on social media or buy newspaper to see this particular process that will be unfolding now, so that we can also receive it and send it directly, and they can then lodge their complaints directly to whatever address is giving to them. But so far, I'm happy in terms of the questions that's been asked. If you want to give us a space or a time frame to say, look, outside of this meeting, there will be another 7 days where you can submit questions that you think is not been part of those that we have identified, by all means. But so far, I'm happy with the questions basically that you have proposed, also with those that the Honourable Van der Westhuizen have proposed. But there should be spaces, specifically for workers, that they can ask, because there was a lot of complaints from them also. Thanks.
No problem. Member Moran, regarding the non-COVID matters, non-COVID TERS matters, perhaps we can put a block in that's saying if you're making a submission, are you making a non-COVID submission? And if they can just maybe in the block then type in their details, but then they must still put in, for example, the reference number for what they sent to the Labour or to UIF, and the ID number, or if they haven't made a complaint to the UIF Labour, that they must put in at least the ID number, they must put in name, surname, contact details in order for the UIF Labour Department to contact them back. But because again, it also doesn't help, we send off all of the queries to them, and then they have no way of contacting the people to assist them with a particular matter. Will that assist you in your first question?
Chair, look, my understanding is this public participation process, it's specifically focused on COVID. Other issues we will refer directly. I was referring to COVID related, and it speaks basically to the UIF TERS. And my understanding is basically this is why that's the reason why there is this public participation process. Other things where employers basically have not paid over UIF monies and so forth, where a person have worked for a number of years, we will deal with the normal way that we have dealt with it previously, Chair. My understanding is this process is for the TERS.
Yes, okay. Member Moran, let me quickly explain. The process is for the COVID-19 TERS funding, but if an employer has not paid an employee or a worker the COVID-19 TERS funding, which should have been paid, that forms part of this public hearing. So everything related to the payout of the COVID-19 TERS money forms part of the public hearing. When I say non-COVID TERS money, I'm referring to matters such as you went on maternity leave and it's not because you are now losing your job because of COVID, or you can't work because the workplace had to close down due to sanitation and things like that. Does that explain it a little bit better for you?
That's my understanding also. That's why I'm saying, Chair, other issues that we have dealt before COVID, we will deal with it in the same manner.
Yes.
This one is related to TERS, where an employer have applied for TERS, an employee have not received, and so forth and so forth. It's specifically focused on TERS. That's where the payouts where the money has been received, where the payments have been made, where the payments have been made outside of the 5 days, and so we can continue. Employees will complain basically. TERS is saying that when I've applied within 15 days, I will have the money in my account as the employer. It was not the case. And some of those issues that we will deal with. It will focus specifically on TERS, nothing else. Other issues like pregnancy issues and so forth, a person basically, we will deal with that normal issues. Whether there's a referral case to the CCMA, so forth, we will deal with it in the normal way. Yeah.
Perfect. Member Maran, I think me and you, we are speaking the same language, but we are just using different words. But we're on the same page. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Jay.
Regarding the advertisements, we'll get to those now. I just wanted to make sure that we are more or less on the same page regarding the questions. Colleagues, would you be okay with if I indicated that by 19 May, which is next week, Wednesday, that by close of business next week, Wednesday, that you just submit if you have any other questions that you would like us to put in the questionnaire that we haven't considered now today, and that after the 19th of May, that we just give the procedural officer maybe also a few working days to liaise with other colleagues also regarding how the questions are drafted, and that we then approve those via email so that can go into the respective survey or advertisement and so on. But I will get to where and when advertisements and so on now. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page regarding the questions. Member van der Westhuizen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that suggestion. I fully agree. Can we just, because I think it will help us, perhaps get a summary of the questions that we've now just submitted verbally in writing. I would like to ask a few of my friends that have had personal experience with their claims, whether they believe that these questions would cover the kind of information that they would like to comment on.
Okay, let me just quickly check. Ms. Adams, would it be possible for you to send us a summary of the questions that we've asked today by 17 May, which is next week, Monday?
Yes, Chair, I can do that. Or it's up to you if you want to wait for the rest of the questions from the members and maybe take that entire summarized version to whoever you need to take it to. That's just a suggestion.
Okay, so what I then suggest is let's keep 19 May as a deadline for us to send in our questions to the committee for what we would like to see. And then after 19 May, would the 24th of May be sufficient, which gives you 1, 2, 3 working days plus a weekend, but it's essentially 3 working days, to put those questions in a manner that is suitable, like, structuring the sentences, clarifying how the questions will be asked in the survey and so on. Would 25 May, Ms. Adams, be suitable for summarizing and making sure those questions are correctly phrased?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, and then if that is the 24th of May, then can I then ask members if by the 26th of May, which will give us 2 working days, for us to then sign off on those questions via email. Member Maran, I see your hand is up.
So it says in all that.
Okay, in order, okay. Any other members, are you happy with those dates so far? Just so that we can make sure that we are all on the same page regarding questions. Okay, no other input, so I'm going to assume that is correct, and I'll just ask that Ms. Adams just works with the Public Education Office just to make sure that our questions are phrased correctly, and that also that we don't ask things like leading questions, that it's simply that someone is able to answer the question the way they need to answer the question. And then, okay, let us get to the advertisements and so on. So there's a suggestion that, for example, the ad hoc committee on COVID advertised in the Argus, the Burger, the Swartland Journal, the George Herald, the Isolezwe, and the Westlander. So the suggestion is then that we follow the similar to advertise in those newspapers. And also the ad hoc committee also had infographics essentially with the respective questions on them. And then that social media, for example, and the website of WCPP were used to advertise those infographics. And these are also then infographics and things that members would be able to send to the respective constituencies. It is also something that we would be able to forward to particular interested stakeholders, and the members can also forward those into stakeholders when they are created. And we can also ask then that the media office and the public education office work together to assist us maybe with infographics. And that perhaps we can even do a radio ad or a radio, even send a voice note to the radio if we can't afford a radio ad in order to advertise this particular matter. But colleagues, if you have any suggestions or if you disagree or if anything new to add, please let me know. Member Moran, I see your hand is up. Do you have any suggestions?
Chair, I don't have a problem with the, and I know that it won't be possible to advertise in all the newspapers. We won't be. But can I just add two? Chair, if it won't be a problem, the Paarl Post and also then the Worcester Standard. If it's possible, if I can add those two newspapers.
Okay, I am happy with the addition of those two newspapers. Members, do you have a problem with the addition of those two newspapers? Member van der Westhuizen and Member Mitchell then.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, I do know this is quite an expensive exercise to advertise in the newspapers, but I think Honourable Moran has rightly identified some of the bigger ones. I don't know if the George Herald is also on your list. That is also one with quite a wide circulation. But then, Chair, I'm wondering, especially since my experience has been not that good with advertisements in newspapers for the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, whether targeted paid advertising, you've referred to social media, but it seems to me there's also now the option of paid advertising on social media. And I'm just thinking that the kind of people that we may want to reach are obviously people that are more active, I presume, on the internet, have access to the internet, etc. And whether that would not be a good experiment also for us as a provincial parliament to start advertising on such dedicated platforms, and particularly if we could direct it at the business community. I think the kind of websites where the business community would often go and frequent. I'm leaving it to you, but I think that is something that we should start to consider to not just advertise in the general media and widely, but to try and target, especially when it comes to a call for feedback and not just for public input in terms of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Regarding Member van der Westhuizen's question regarding the George Herald, it is already on the suggested list, the George Herald, so that deals with that particular one. Regarding paid social media, I'm more than happy for that. Perhaps we should do it on Facebook as well as Twitter. And then what we should do is, I think instead of just the business community, that when we do the paid on Facebook and Twitter, that we ask those who work in the Western Cape as well as those who own businesses in the Western Cape, because then you kind of try as much as possible to cover employees as well as employers. Member Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, thank you. If I lose you, we are on oversight, so we're busy driving. So I've been trying to keep quiet so that I don't interrupt the committee meeting. Chair, I'm partly covered by Honourable van der Westhuizen, and I think that we need to find a different way of doing public hearings. The amount of money that's being spent on the logistics to get a limited response we need to weigh up the economic or opportunity costs when it comes to these things. With that being said, I'm not disputing and I'm not discarding that public participation is important. Chair, are you there? Can you hear me? Because you just froze.
I can hear you, Member Mitchell.
All right. So I want to echo the sentiments of Honourable van der Westhuizen that we should try and see, and we must perhaps, this is an ideal opportunity to try and move away from the big dailies, if I can call it that, but then do targeted with community-based newspapers, which community members are more wat die woord wat ek soek, meer geneig om te lees of om te koop. Instead of buying one of the big dailies, and because I don't want to mention any names, otherwise I'm going to be accused of being biased towards a particular daily. But yeah, I think we need to, with the public education.
Okay, Member Mitchell, we kind of lost you a little bit there, but I think we got more or less of what you were trying to indicate to us. My advice then, if we think about some of the dailies that are a little bit cheaper, perhaps one of the ideas is then to put in an advertisement in DSON if they take advertisements. That might be a good idea as well, because that is one of the more cheaper dailies. Members, if I could get your input then on DSON, and then Member Nkondlo. Member Nkondlo, please go first, and then you can also indicate about DSON as well then, while we wait for Member Mitchell.
Okay, no, thanks, Chair. I think I support, DSON, because also I would have requested that we consider issues of language, especially because here we're talking about, a variance in terms of literacy levels from your low-end employees who would, some of them, and not all of them, be able to converse or place their issues in English. So I think community papers like DSON, from where I'm sitting, I think actually have got a wider reach, and I'm sure the Secretariat that is assisting us with Public Participation Office would be able to look at what is their audience ship at this point. So I think we really need to consider those localized newspapers, because majority of people, those that distributed inside houses. I know at my home, my mom will always have City Vision and Vukani, which is distributed every Thursday, and she would read it, religiously. So I think it's important we consider those. I wanted to check, Chair, and perhaps that is something that could be considered, whether in terms of GCIS reach, because I know GCIS has got, I think their Vukuzenzele and all the other platforms at which they communicate government information and government services, and they've got provincial offices. I'm not sure the extent, and also in relation to timeframes, perhaps it's something that could be considered if it would be feasible, to try and get that particular traction, which I would believe also from a cost point of view, it should not be costly for us, because it's government to government, and it's the government assisting us to actually ensure, we ensure effectiveness of a national government policy. So I'm just saying, I think it's an area or a platform to be considered to with GCIS Western Cape. If they could, we can then share our notices about the public participation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chair,
Member, I do want to, Member Mitchell, I'm going to be with you now. But Member Nkondo, what we do is we do send all information regarding public hearings, public participation to all government departments in the Western Cape and also to local government and ask them where they have buildings to also put it up. So I do think that particular one will be covered. Member Mitchell, we almost lost you there on the road. You can come in now.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know where you've lost me, but I think you've got the gist of my input, so I'm not going to repeat it. The last thing that I just wanted to add in, I don't know what sake kamers in English, but that we approach the various sake kamers across the province and then try and see if we can't get them to also send it out to their networks.
Okay, thank you so much. I think then what we do is when we send it to the government departments, and we can maybe just ask Ms. Adams if from DDAT side, if we don't have a list of all the business chambers, that DDAT just assists us with sending this out to the respective business chambers. And then just I almost forgot about the one suggestion from Member Nkondlo. We will maybe just check the public education if they can please assist us with translation, and I'm sure that Parliament can assist us also with translation. For example, if we send it to an English newspaper, that it's sent in English. If we send it to a Xhosa newspaper, that it's sent in Xhosa. If we send it to an Afrikaans newspaper, that it is sent in Afrikaans. And that when we do the infographics, that we can send then in the email to all members also the respective infographics, and then you can also then choose maybe which language you would like to forward to your respective stakeholders. And I think that will more or less cover those respective suggestions. Colleagues, may I now move on to the timeline for taking submissions as well as the public hearing date? If there's nothing else on the method of advertisements. Member Mitchell, is your hand still up, or is that from a previous round?
Sorry, Chair, previous round.
Okay, no problem. Okay. So regarding the timeline for advertisements, there was a suggestion from the procedural side that we give 3 weeks for advertisement. So if we look at us signing off the questions on the 26th of May. Member Maran, I see your hand is up.
Continue, Chair, because I wanted to check also after sign of the 26th, when will the actual advertisements appear in the newspaper? But continue. I think you are heading in that direction.
No problem, colleagues. I think that because this is such a topical matter, that we are all very passionate about ensuring that we get it to as many people as possible. Okay, so the advice is that if we're signing it off on the 26th, let me just also open my diary here, that Miss Adams, how long would it take from us signing off the questions and creating, for example, infographics and getting quotes and putting in the advertisements? How long would you need after that in order to place the respective advertisements?
Thank you, Chair. So if we sign off the adverts on the 26th of May, the advert can be completed on that day. It then needs to be sent to language services for translation. I will give that 2 or 3 days. Then once we get that, we can send in the request, we can procure and send in the request for quotes. I would say, depending on the system that they use, give that a week. And then, of course, with a lot of the community newspapers, they only publish on certain days or distribute on certain days. So I would say give it about 2 to 3 weeks from the date of approval of the questions.
Okay, so if sign off same day, more or less the 26th, and then I think we can then give a week and a half after the 26th of May, because if it takes 2 to 3 days for language plus an extra week for quotes, then let's see here quickly. Then that will essentially bring us to more or less the 4th of June. So by the 4th of June, the language and more or less quotes for publishing and procurement should be complete. And then can we aim to publish within the week of 7 of June or 5 of June actually, 5 of June until the 12th of June, which is then the week after that. Because then if a newspaper only publishes on a particular day, then we can more or less in that week see all of the publications then. Ms. Adams, would that be in order?
Sorry, Chair, you said the 5th. Sorry, can you just repeat the dates for the proposed dates for the advertising?
No problem. So if we give you guys until the 4th of June, which is a Friday, to finish all the various language and procurement, that's more or less a week and a half from the signing off of the questions and the infographics. Then between the 5th of June, which is that Saturday, and the 12th of June, which is the next Saturday, there's more or less a week. Can we expect for the publication of the advertisements to be placed in that week?
I would say that realistically, okay, so if we're doing the translation and then the procurement, I would say safely from that 12th of June, that week, that would probably be the advertising.
Okay.
Because even if we procure, we might have missed the deadline for the next week's publication. So I'd rather be safe and say the week after, in that week that we would then. And then, of course, all the infographics and Dear South Africa, etc., everything would be synchronized with a media plan. So we don't have to worry about that. It's more the advertising.
Okay, so can we give you guys in from the 12th until the 19th of June for the publication, because that gives you then a week after the 4th of June until the 12th of June, just to make sure that the respective matters will be placed.
Chair?
Yes, Member Maran?
Yeah, no, I thought that the procedural officer said from the 26th until publication, 3 weeks. That's how I understood that. I'm not sure whether I've listened wrong.
The 26th of May, 3 weeks after that, is more or less the 16th of June. So for me, that's why I'm saying like the week of the 12th until the 19th of June would then give that whole week, because if newspapers only publish on certain days, we can even extend that period to possibly, let me see here quickly, we can even extend the period to the 21st of June for publication. Members, would you be okay with that? Ms. Adams, are you okay with that? So then the 12th until the 21st of June for the actual placement.
That's fine. I will try and get it done much sooner than that to give a much longer time, but I'm just that's just the safe.
Yes, okay. So to be safe, we will say that we aim for placement of the advertisements in the week of 12th until 21st of June, just so that if a particular newspaper only places on a particular day, then that gives our administrative officials time for that. And then if we're placing it, let's assume we are placing it on the 21st of June, to be fair. I'm not sure if we need a complete 3 weeks, but we can always then on the 12th, more or less the week of the 12th of July, to get the deadline, because then if the deadline is the 12th of July, that is in constituency week, which will then give us time to, after constituency week, to possibly come back and then have an actual date for the public hearing. Would members be okay with the deadline for submissions to be the 12th of July? That is essentially 3 weeks after the 21st of June, assuming that at the latest the placements are on the 21st of June. Okay, if no input on that, then I'm assuming then everyone's okay with the deadline for the submission to be the 12th of July. Member van der Westhuizen?
Chair, can I just ask, can we leave it to you to determine the final date? Because I think we also need to take our parliamentary program into concern. Or it's no use having a deadline and then we're unable to within a reasonable time thereafter, attend to the matter. So let's take this as a guideline, but I would like to keep the final date open for finalization between you and the administration.
Thank you. Members, the reason I'm asking for a deadline date is in the advertisement, we are going to have to tell people by when they have to send in their submissions. The date for the public hearing, that is a date as a committee, we can set that date by asking the programming committee for a specific date for the public hearing, which can then also be based on the amount and type of submissions we have received. But I do think we have to decide on a date that we're going to tell Deirdre from the public, Deirdre, you have to send us your submission by this date. Member Maran?
Chair, I'm also thinking now, because I thought that we have said from the day of publication, we will count 3 weeks, if I'm correct. But I was just thinking of the different newspapers and those basically who goes out once a week, maybe on a Thursday. Normally the Worcester Standard will goes out on a Thursday, and also maybe the Paarl Post. Are we counting then from that particular dates 3 weeks? Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Maran. Let me just clarify quickly. We have now said between the 12th and the 21st of June, the advertisements will be placed. That is about a week and a half for advertisements being placed, and that is after giving the procedural officers enough time for the procurement and checking which dates it will be placed upon. Now, 3 weeks is from the 21st of June, which is the last day which we've indicated for placement. So if a newspaper has placed on the 16th, we will still count the 3 weeks from the 21st of June and not the 16th. If the newspaper placed on the 21st of June, it will still be 3 weeks from the 21st. And that way, it is our way of then making sure that we have a minimum of 3 weeks for people to make a submission. Member Maran, does that make sense?
3 weeks from the 1st of June.
21st.
21st of June. I'm
Yes.
happy 3 weeks from that. No, it's
yes. And then 3 weeks from the 21st of June is the 12th of July, which is in the constituency period, but that will then give our procedural officers at least almost 2 weeks to put all of that information together for us for whichever date we then decide to have the public hearing upon. Member van der Westhuizen?
Yeah, Chair, I've also just looked at our provisional program going forward, and it seems then you're correct. It will give the administration at least 2 weeks, and I think therefore I can concur with those proposals.
Perfect, so much. So 12th of July will be our deadline date for the submissions. And then if you would allow me, I will then liaise with the procedural officer regarding a date after that for the actual public hearing, taking into consideration that we should probably at least give a week and a half for members to read through the respective information once we send it to everyone. And we will get this date in collaboration with the programming committee. Colleagues, with that, I do not think there is anything else for us to discuss. Can we now please move on to the draft annual activities report?
Chair?
Yes, Member Maran?
With your permission, can I be excused?
You may be excused, Member Maran. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been much appreciated.
Thank you very much to everyone present.
Wonderful.
Have a nice day.
Thank you so much. Bye. Ms. Adams, if we can just put the annual report up quickly. Perfect. Okay, members, you have also received this via email. If we can just go through page 1. Just check everyone's names are correct. Okay, page 2. If there are no edits on page 2, that's just what we did in terms of legislation. Page 3. If there are no edits on page 3, page 4. Okay, that deals just with the oversight visits we've done. Go on, you can go down. Legislation and provincial bills, that's page 5. Public participation, financial particulars, and there at the end you'll see that there's money left over from under point 7. Go just a little bit down. There we go. More down. Perfect. Colleagues, if you are happy with the content of the report, could I please have a mover for the report?
I move. Do you hear me, Chair?
I think we might have lost the chair.
Agreed.
Honourable van der Westhuizen, you moving?
I move that we adopt the report.
I second that.
Thanks, members.
Shall we suspend just until the...
The chairperson's back.
Thank you.
Apologies, colleagues, I got kicked off the meeting. Where were we? Okay. I think we were at the moving of the report. Have members moved already, or what have I missed?
Done. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Member van der Westhuizen. Ms. Adams, if you can put up the minutes for us, please. Thank you so much. Okay. Members, this is the minutes of Wednesday, 31 March at 8 o'clock. If we can just check all the names are correct and all that on page 1. Okay, can we go down to page 2? Maybe just on page 2 there by the second paragraph, we can just take the letter T after section out. Just the word section in paragraph 2. Just the letter T needs to be taken out. It says chairperson indicated blah, 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 where it read section. Oh no, sorry, you're correct. I thought it's a spelling mistake but it's actually referring to the spelling mistake. I apologize. Okay, I just saw the little red line from Word underneath it. Okay, that is correct. I apologize for that. Let's go down. Okay, we can go down. There's no edits on page 2. Let's go down. Okay, let's go down. And go down. Thank you so much. You can go down. Perfect. If I could just have a mover for the minutes then, please, if there are no edits.
I move, Chair. I move.
Thank you so much. If there's a seconder.
Seconded.
Thank you so much. The minutes are thus duly adopted. Colleagues, with that, thank you so much. Are there any other matters for the committee in terms of resolutions and or actions other than that which has been raised this morning, information that needs to be sent to us? Okay, if none, colleagues, thank you so much. With that, the meeting... Oh, Member Nkondla?
Yes, Chair. I am not sure in terms of the resolutions, is one allowed to do a resolution that is, or to present an issue that is outside of the agenda items that were on the table, or such would require a different process? If I can get guidance before I can present the matter.
Yes, you may, Member Nkondla. We will obviously try and deal with it now. If not, then we'll ask also that you give us also time to then deal with the respective matter. But please present the situation or the resolution, and then we'll see how we can assist you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. In light of the inquiry, and I think the questions you, through your office, you assisted to get responses to on the situation of informal traders in the city of Cape Town, I think part of the advice that you provided in your response also was to, because one of the requests that one had made is how we can request the department, and if it is possible, its subsequent a partner in the city around the matters that were placed in my table around the situation of informal trading, including if there's any strategy by the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, around promoting and supporting informal traders. So I'm placing it on record, open to advice on how the matter can be dealt with as an official matter of the committee.
Okay, so Member Nkondlo emailed me regarding a particular matter, but there was general information. I forwarded it to the department for their answering. The department responded to Member Nkondlo. Much of the information that was responded to related to specifically the Department of Local Government, which the DDAT could not assist with. My advice in the last paragraph to Member Nkondlo via email was, given the answers from the department, that many of this falls within the scope of local government committee, which related to the informal trading permits, because you get it per municipality and not in general via the province. My recommendation was for the member to write to the chairperson of local government to request a general briefing regarding the matter and to invite the Committee on Economic Development and Tourism, and that alternatively that we propose at the next meeting of our committee that we ask local government if we can have a joint briefing on the respective matter, because informal trading permits do fall under respective municipalities and it's not a provincial mandate. However, if you want us specifically to do a briefing on how we're assisting informal traders, I am happy with that, for DDAT to do a presentation on the assistance to informal traders, because there are particular programs such as, for example, containerized stuff and buildings that have been built for informal trading that DDAT does assist with, as well as the red tape unit. But my advice is that we then resolve to ask the local government committee if we could then have a joint briefing on this particular matter, one general regarding assistance to informal traders, as well as how the informal trading permits process work in the respective municipalities. Member Nkondlo, have I conveyed your request accurately, and are you happy with that we follow that particular process?
Yes, Chair, I'm okay, because I think, as you would recall, going back to my questions, yes, there were specific questions that were asked by the informal traders associations, which I think the respective responses by the city on detail of those matters, and those that communique has been sent to the informal traders to take up those matters. But generally, I think in the questions, I also made a request to yourself on how we as the committee, understanding that informal trading is part of the ambit or a responsibility in terms of economic development, that as the standing committee of economic development we ought to pursue. So what you talk about services or support or a strategy in general beyond just permit, because the questions were not only about permit, was just a general a response from the city around informal trading environment in the city of Cape Town. So I'm quite okay with the response to say a joint briefing to deal with those specificities of the city of Cape Town as a municipality, but also generally, I think for me, what is important as a member is to understand the informal trading environment in the Western Cape, whether it's in the city of Cape Town or it's right down in your constituency in Laingsburg. So I would appreciate if indeed we can have that joint presentation with the Department of Economic Development in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think we're talking from the same hymn sheet. So a briefing for assistance for informal traders, DDAT, and permits, local government, and if possible, if we can please make that a joint committee. Members, Are you happy with that request and that resolution?
That's fine, Chair.
Okay, members, with that then, thank you so much for today and for your robust engagement. We will ask the procedural officer just to send you the respective dates that we've agreed upon that matters should be sent to the committee. And with that, thank you so much. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Bye.